Well, good evening. Welcome to the July 9th, 2024 Bellevue City Council regular meeting. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July. City Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Thank you. Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Malakutian. Here. Councilmember Hamilton. Here. Councilmember Lee.
Ooh.
Councilmember Neuenhouse. Here. Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn. Here. Thank you.
Did I get called?
You did. Councilmember Lee.
Sorry?
Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Thank you.
What an announcement. What a noise.
Deputy Mayor Malakutian, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Of course, please rise. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Justice for all.
We have one proclamation tonight for Parks and Recreation Month. It will be read by Councilmember Hamilton and received by Michael Shiosaki, our Director of Parks and Community Services. Go ahead.
Whereas parks and recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our community, and whereas the programs provide places for people of all ages and cultures to gather, celebrate, and volunteer their time and talents to make a difference, and whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities and aid in the prevention of chronic disease while improving the mental and emotional health of all residents. And whereas people with disabilities benefit from opportunities and choices for recreation, socialization, and fully participating in the life of our community. And whereas parks and recreation programs can also contribute to a community's economic prosperity through property values and tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas our parks and natural areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas Bellevue's parks, trails, and natural areas are treasured community assets. And whereas a city and a park, Bellevue's parks and natural recreation areas are fundamental to our community's environmental well-being by improving air and water quality, protecting groundwater, preventing flooding, and providing habitat for wildlife. Now, therefore, I, Dave Hamilton, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of July 24th as Parks and Recreation Month in Bellevue, and encourage everyone to enjoy and recognize the many benefits of our parks, natural areas, trails, and recreation facilities.
Thank you. Mr. Shiosaki, come on up and then we'll do a picture after.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the City Council. As you likely know, it is a very busy time in the park system with day camps underway and lifeguarded swimming beaches in full swing. And it was great to kick off Parks and Recreation Month, and I'll say with a bang, with the successful Bellevue Family Fourth celebration just last week. And it brought tens of thousands of people to Downtown Park to enjoy entertainment, food, and of course, fireworks. That event wouldn't have been possible without our long-term partnership with the Bellevue Downtown Association and our colleagues in fire, police, transportation, and utilities who helped ensure that the event was safe and enjoyable for everyone. You know, next Tuesday, we'll kick off our Summer Outdoor Movies in the Park series, and those movies will be held on Tuesday evenings from July 16th through August 20th at Downtown Park, and on Thursday evenings from August 1st to 22nd at Crossroads Park. But most of all, I want to thank you for your ongoing support of parks, recreation, and human services in the city, and of course, for proclaiming July as Parks and Recreation Month. Thanks so much.
Michael, you are so modest. The parks, or Bellevue Parks, won 3 awards at the end of last month, and so I'll tell everybody. Kim and Durkar, Mary Boyle, and Jennifer Brown won the Ron C. Davis II Unsung Hero Award. Let's see, Colin Walker won a Citation of Merit, and you, Mr. Shiosaki, won WRPA's Impact and Influence Award. So we're very proud of you and the Parks Department.
Thank you so much.
Let's get a picture. Why am I missing some? Okay. Okay, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we have oral communications. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There are 7 pre-registered speakers on tonight's list. So before I start calling names, I'll go over a few of the rules that the council has in place for oral communications. So the total time for oral communications is for a period of no more than 30 minutes, and all topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. The presiding officer is authorized in each of those categories to give preference to those speaking to items, who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days or who are speaking to items that will come in front of council within the next 60 days. Speakers are allowed up to 3 minutes to speak, and only 3 speakers are allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. Unique to tonight's agenda is that we also have a public hearing under item 9A, which is related to the 25-26 biennial budget. If you signed up for oral communications and your topic is broadly the budget, we have automatically moved you to the public hearing, which is where those comments should be heard. So with that, I will call our first speaker, who is Valentina Veneva.
And I'm going to say to all our public commenters tonight that I ask that we all be polite to each other, not use swear words, and not slander people's character. So that's just to everybody. Come on up. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. I've seen on the agenda that another recommendation for the Transportation Commission has been proposed. And while I have nothing to say against Susanna Kelman personally, I can't help but feel that once again, the nominee's political career played a more important role than representation. As many other Bellevue's households, mine has only 1 car. I personally move around the city mostly by transit like today, and yet I am not aware of a single member of the Commission who would rely on transit as their primary mode of transportation. Now there is an opportunity to address this imbalance, and I ask you to appoint someone whose lived experience can contribute to more informed and equitable decisions for our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Catherine Rudolph. Okay, I do not see Ms. Rudolph online. If you are online, if you could use the raise hand function to identify yourself. Okay, I will move on to the next speaker, Irina Muller. She's joining us virtually. Ms. Muller, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can. Your time begins now.
Thank you so much. My name is Irene Muller, and I'm here today on behalf of Essentials First, which is a nonprofit has a primary location in Bellevue and serves folks all across the Puget Sound area. And I am here today because I want to be sure that the Bellevue City Council is with us in paying attention to the lack of access to essential hygiene happening for Bellevue residents and seeing all the places that that is showing up in the lives of our community, the lives of our kids and the families that live inside of Bellevue. So what we do is we provide essential hygiene products to folks who need them. We don't have an income proof requirement. We don't require folks to have identifying documentation. Our goal is for folks who need it to get it. What we see overwhelmingly is that we're serving large families, multi-generational households, folks who are caring for elders, caring for children, caring for themselves, or loved ones with disabilities. And hygiene plays a really essential role in their ability to do all of that. You may or may not know, none of the existing subsidy programs have any provisions for hygiene. So you can't buy soap, laundry detergent, hand sanitizer, wipes, shampoo, conditioner, bar soap, any of these things with an EBT card. There's no provisions for these things in the WIC program. So cash assistance is the only program that has any flexibility to be used for hygiene that folks who are reliant on any kind of assistance to meet their basic needs have access to. And as we all know, all of that goes to housing and often isn't enough already. So we are hoping that you will continue to partner with us in making these resources more available to more folks in Bellevue. We have seen in our experience, we're working on figuring out how to gather the data to show this empirically, but we see that kids are much more willing to go to school, better able to pay attention, able to represent themselves the way that they like to in social situations, sports teams, extracurriculars, academically in their community when they are able to show up feeling safe, feeling clean, feeling like themselves. And similarly for parents, that the stress it takes off of parents to have the ability to provide clean clothing and homes and bodies for their children and themselves and their parents and their loved ones makes a huge difference in folks' ability to show up in their community as well. So I hope you will continue to consider hygiene when you're talking about basic needs in any context, and to keep us in mind as one of your partners in town who is trying to make sure that this essential need is more than adequately represented when we're talking about funding, when we're talking about messaging, and we're talking about what basic needs we are trying to meet for the folks in our community who sometimes need a little extra help to meet them. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope everyone stays cool and remembers to hydrate.
The next speaker is Fei Ho.
Respect Mayor, Council members, I'm Fei Ho. I stand before you again today with an urgent update on community's effort to protect Bellevue's irreplaceable tree canopy. Since our last meeting, we had meaningful discussions with neighbors on nextdoor.com and other forums. Our petition has gained 75 new signatures showing growing public concern over this issue. We're calling for very important actions. First, investigate the violation of Bellevue's tree protection ordinance and implement a strict system for inspection, enforcement, and meaningful consequences when permit condition related to tree protection are violated during development project. Hold the developers, property owners accountable for unauthorized removal, landmark trees, trees on right-of-way, trees marked for protection on approved permits, implement significant fine and revoke permits or license for serious violation involve protected trees. Those rules are important for everyone to follow, just like traffic lights. Green means to go, red means to stop. It is clear and simple. The same should apply for our tree protection. When a permit said a certain tree must be kept, and that should be followed strict without enforcement, those rules really become meaningless. Our community demanded real solution that balance substantial development and preserve our invaluable natural heritage. Let's work together to ensure Bellevue remains a city in a park, not a park in a city. We look forward to see concrete steps taking protection for our valuable trees for current and future generations. Thank you.
The next speaker is Timothy Siegel.
Mayor, council members, I was walking through downtown park the other day, and I heard a big racket. I looked over, there were 4 landscape workers, each with a backpack style leaf blower making a huge noise. It's a good way to ruin a pleasant walk through the park, otherwise pleasant walk through the park. 4.5 years ago, I sent an email to the city council. I did get a pro forma response. The email was about this issue. And 1.5 years ago, I had a brief discussion with Mayor Robinson about this. It doesn't seem like a lot has happened, but as time has gone by, other cities have started to address this issue. Washington, D.C., Burlington, Vermont have all passed measures to rein in these noisy and very polluting gas-powered yard tools. They are also very polluting. Most of these gas-powered leaf blowers, they have two-stroke engines. A single two-stroke engine puts out as much air pollution as 30 to 50 automobiles. They are very dirty. And this is right in the park with baby carriages going by. It's not good for babies, and it's not good for adults. A growing body of research shows that noise is bad for people's health, and we certainly know that particulate pollution is. I know that there is a bill in the Washington legislature addressing this issue to some degree, but we don't know what'll happen with it. But I would like to see an ordinance at least against two-stroke engines in yard equipment, at least in parks and high-density residential areas. If we can't do that, if that's too much, I would hope that at least for maintaining city parks, that the city should be a good citizen. And that means you don't expose visitors to this loud noise and this air pollution that's bad for health on both accounts. And this is something the city could do without an ordinance. I don't know if the people who do this work are contractors or they're direct employees, but whatever, the city could have them use battery-powered leaf blowers. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope we do something.
City Manager, I know that that's something that we discussed at the retreat. Can you maybe at some point give us an update on if we are anywhere with that?
Yes, I certainly will. We do have the leaf blower noise on the Movie Work program for 2025. So that's one element of it, but I'll give you a full update.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Maria Hudson.
Are you okay? Who's coughing?
Hi. I am a lifelong Washingtonian, graduated from the UW with honors. My father is retired detective, City of Seattle Supervisor Warrants. My mother's a retired college professor. I am disturbed because I am a disabled parent. I have a disabled child. I am presently in a lawsuit with the Bellevue Police Department and King County Housing Authority. I'm experiencing direct retaliation. Our service animals were taken by an adjudicated domestically violent family member, and Bellevue Police Department on May 8th assisted them with concealing, interfering with our service animals, transferring them and defrauding us of them, and then told us to sue them and her. So while I'm sitting here right now, as we talk about slander or any kind of defamation or demagoguery, I've been targeted by Bellevue Police Department, First Amendment retaliation, everything from demagoguery to false reports to CPS when I've been in lawsuit with Bellevue School District, to false reports of animal abuse. I literally paid for medical property for my severely disabled and autistic child, who, by the way, they failed to protect at Bellevue School District and is commercially sexually exploited. Presently, we are unhoused and in a domestic violence shelter. And with that knowledge that my daughter is daily despondent, and I've given them every manner of evidence, and I called them, by the way, under the RCW as the complainant, the domestic violence victim. They never showed up to me, never took my evidence. They went directly to our domestic violence perpetrator who was adjudicated for fourth-degree assault, and they lied with her. It is 2 months and 1 day after May 8th when the misconduct of these officers happened. I was at the police department, and they continued it. It's direct retaliation while I'm in a pro se federal lawsuit with them. As a parent, when I pay for medical property for my disabled daughter, I am as entitled as Bellevue Square's business owners to the return of it. It's a violation of Americans with Disability Act, refusal of services. Under 1973, Section 504, I'm both disabled. One of those animals are my companion animal, and my daughter, her autistic doctor, wrote a prescription for our other animals to be animal therapy. I deliver special educational services and homeschool to my daughter. And in the most difficult of situations of her being displaced, homeless, her going through being a commercially sexually exploited child, they add on the deprivation of the right of the return of our service animals with a known adjudicated domestic violence
May I
perpetrator.
stop you
Ms.
here
Hudson.
for a second and ask you to follow us up with an email to us? Because the time is up and we'd like to follow up with you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back to Catherine Rudolph, who I believe is joining us online. Ms. Rudolph, can you raise your hand to identify yourself? Ms. Rudolph, can you hear me?
I'm actually on the phone.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Your time begins now.
Okay. I'm calling to speak in favor of Susanna Kyleman's nomination for the Transportation Commission. I've known her and worked with her for several years, and she's a very high-quality thinker, and she brings a great deal to any organization that she joins. And I worked for the Pierce County Executive, Bruce Dahlmeyer, and I did boards and commissions for a long time. And you want to get high-quality people whose minds are good and who have good judgment for any board or commission. And you have a particularly complex situation in Bellevue, where in addition to having car, bus, bike, as the usual transportation modalities, you also have significant sound transit impacts, and you have major freeways that go through Bellevue, and you also have on-demand shuttles. So I think it's a very complex transportation environment, and that her thinking processes are very well suited to this particular appointment. So that's my message. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker tonight is Alex Zimmerman.
I'm sorry, I disabled man, yeah. So, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Concerned.
Yeah, 20 seconds you stealing from me. When you dirty Nazi Gestapo anti-Semite pig, stop interrupt me, huh? I talk to you, Mayor, and to your boyfriend, Iranian Muslim, Deputy Mayor. When you stop and doing this? I speak everything by law. I never broken law or rule for 1 second. You don't like me because you're pathological anti-Semite. And I told you before.
Okay, I'm
many
going to
times
ask
before,
you, I'm going to warn
mentally
you,
sick
I'm going
people.
to ask you to stop for a minute. I'm going to warn you not to tell people that they are something that maligns their character is not true, okay? Let's just talk to things the council
What are you
deals
talking
with.
about? I told you before, you're very low-class professional. You level very low.
Okay,
Everything what
that's
is I
it.
talk is absolutely
You're done,
legal.
you're done.
Was this exactly what is I told
No,
you?
you're not, you can't follow directions. I'm going to ask you to leave. All right, I'm going to ask if there's anybody else signed up.
It's not good for everybody. 150,000 people
There are
know
no
about it.
additional pre-registered speakers. We do still have a few minutes left of oral communications, so I'd ask at this point if there's anyone else joining us tonight who would like to speak to the council, please raise your hand. If you're online, use the raise hand function. No hands, Mayor. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the report of our city manager, Ms. Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. We have one item under the city manager's report tonight. This past May and June, our neighborhood outreach team, working with all of our city departments, and many of you attended these events. They hosted a series of 3 public events around the community, including some bus tours, walking tours, on-site fairs and experiences for kids and families. And tonight we have community development staff here to share details and also some feedback from the events and how they were received by the community. So it's my pleasure to introduce Julie Ellenhorn, our program manager, and Rainey Zhu, cultural outreach assistant. And with that, I will turn it over to Julie.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Thank you for having us here tonight to talk to you about Experience Bellevue 2024. We're here for information only tonight and to tell you a little bit more about Experience Bellevue. Next slide. We introduced the Neighborhoods Conference in 2016. It's held every 2 years, and it has evolved into an interactive, immersive experience that takes our residents out into the community to learn and grow together. So what made 2024 unique? We made Experience Bellevue more accessible, more engaging to a broader section of the community, and we really feel like we broke down barriers this year. We were a family-friendly event for the first time, language accessible with translation and interpretation in Mandarin and in Spanish, and we offered a variety of mobility options to attend the events, including light rail, use of bellhop, and free parking in the Spring District. We had nearly 700 participants over 3 Saturday mornings, in addition to a festival that was held the middle Saturday. And many people who attended, this was their first interaction with a city event. Truly a one-city effort that every department here participated in. And I especially want to thank you, the City Council, for kicking off Experience Bellevue the first morning with a meet and mingle breakfast with council members. You provided a very warm welcome to our community. Next slide. And after that breakfast, attendees headed out on bus tours and walking tours. They visited parks, the Porchlight Shelter. They toured downtown, the Grand Connection, and Wilburton on foot. Community learned about homelessness through boarding a Sound Transit bus and heading to Porchlight for an on-site immersive experience. Participants had a behind-the-scenes look at our arts district, discovered emerging artists and businesses in Bel Red. They discovered hidden treasures in our neighborhoods through a neighborhood character bus tour and a photography tour, and they learned about growth and development and plans for downtown in Wilburton. Some even had the opportunity to soak in natural beauty at the botanical gardens or go forest bathing. Several of our tours were simultaneously translated in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. And to learn a little bit more about this aspect of the event, I'm going to turn it over to Rainey, our cultural outreach assistant, to talk about cultural outreach and language access.
Thanks, Julie, and good evening, everyone. I'm so thrilled to share you with the incredible impact and heartwarming feedback from the event. And by providing cultural outreach and language access this year, we prioritized ensuring that all community members could engage with and benefit from the event. So regardless of language barriers and cultural barrier, this inclusive approach made almost everyone said that they feel welcome and included. And to engage with different communities such as Chinese-speaking and Spanish-speaking communities, we use various of strategies and channels to reach people. For example, we contact with nonprofit organizations. We participate in different activities of youth club, moms group, and employee associations. And our effort paid off significantly. we saw fantastic registration numbers and high attendance rate. The city walking tours and Welcome to the City Hall offered simultaneous interpretation. So the use of headset you can see in the picture and ensure hundreds of participants can enjoy the presentation in their language. So people can fully immerse themselves in the presentation to learn the essential services of the city. And families were greeted by friendly volunteers in their language when they arrived in the City Hall, and they felt safe after they learned about the city, like recycling, water qualities, CPR, emergency preparedness, and digital safety, and crime prevention from the police department and other departments like fire and utilities. I saw many adults were as excited as their kids when they saw the drones and the motorcycles. So I saw a lot of seniors said they're in their language to express how they loved the event. And I just want to say this event is not only an activity, it's the celebration of our diverse community. Thank you. I will turn back to Julie.
Thanks, Heidi. So in addition to all of the activities and the botanical garden tours and Welcome to City Hall, those were all designed for family participation. This season we added a family festival in the Spring District. We invited Kids Quest to host activities. We had live music, city resource tables, food trucks, and we created an amazing afternoon of entertainment for everyone. We had community partners including Sound Transit, Wright Renstead, Kids Quest, the Bellevue Schools Foundation, the Network on Aging, and more. Attendance of over 300 people, and that was even with some raindrops. Next slide. So we did have some lessons learned. We learned that our huge pre-registration numbers really showed that our community really wants to be engaged. They want to be out on the streets, out in the community, and learning together. Language-specific programming was really appreciated, brought in our Chinese and Spanish-speaking communities, and I think our staff is now really well-versed in how to grow these offerings in the future. We learned that weather does have an impact on attendance, and we should always wish for sunshine. And Experience Bellevue provided interactive immersive programming, attracted first-time attendees, and was a really good entry point of connection for residents to the city and also from our staff to our residents. I just want to share a couple of quotes that I received after the event. The art walk was amazing. So much is hiding in plain sight. I didn't know about any of it. Thank you. I very much enjoyed the tour of our various neighborhoods. It was interesting to learn about the history of Bellevue, how it grew, and to see the variety found in different parts of the city. I was very surprised to learn how many foreign-born and non-white residents live in Bellevue. I'm sure this is what helps make Bellevue a vibrant and interesting city. Thank you for the opportunity to experience this tour. Next slide. So we love providing the Experience Bellevue program as an opportunity for our community to connect with the city, and we look forward to the next opportunity to connect. We will be hosting neighborhood walks next week on the 15th, 17th, and 18th in Westlake, Sammamish, Lake Hills, Victoria, and West Bellevue, and I'd encourage everyone to visit our website and join us next week as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for including us in that. Okay, City Manager, anything else?
There are no more reports tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we have council business and new initiatives, and we have two recommendations to the Arts Commission and one to the Transportation Commission. So we'll start with Councilmember Stokes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm really pleased to bring forth Ms. Koyong Chen, who's been very, very active in the community over a number of years and organizing groups, and just delightful in having the conversation with her, and she's going to be a great, I think, addition. And also, the second one is Mr. Joydeep Hazra. He's also been very involved in the community, including working with the Bellevue Arts Museum. And I think they're both very good additions to the Arts Commission.
Would you like to
Go
make
ahead
a
and make
motion?
Yeah. I move to appoint Kweong Chin to a full term on the Arts Commission expiring May 31st, 2028, and Joydeep Hazra to a partial term on the Arts Commission expiring May 31st, 2026.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And then, Councilmember Neuenhuis, you have a recommendation for the Transportation Commission.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Tonight I'm excited to put forward Susanna Lee Kyleman to the Transportation Commission. I want to thank everybody for the supportive emails, especially those from the Greater Seattle Korean Association, the Asia Pacific Cultural Center as well. Susanna brings a lot of experience and community and really dedication to community and country as a United States Air Force veteran. She had the opportunity to travel around the world to witness firsthand the importance of well-functioning multimodal transportation systems. She's also volunteered for humanitarian missions to improve water supply, housing, and healthcare. Understands that transportation infrastructure has always been a key driver to economic, cultural, and safety success. I think she'll bring a great, fresh perspective to the Transportation Commission, well-rounded, passionate, multimodal access, and brings a very unique perspective to the importance of transportation facilities, of pedestrians, of freight and first responders, areas which sometimes are overlooked when it comes to transportation access. I think her priority will be about informed decisions based on data and resident needs. She'll incorporate an innovative approach to ensure that responsibly evolving our transportation technologies while being fiscally prudent, environmentally sustainable, and accounting for all voices in Bellevue. So with that, I'll make a motion that I move to appoint Susanna Lee Kyleman to a full term of the Transportation Commission expiring May 31st, 2028.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, terrific, thank you. Next up, the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations to the tree code people. All right. We have a public hearing tonight, and I'll let the city manager introduce that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have a very brief presentation, and staff will then ask Council to conduct the public hearing on our 2025-2026 operating budget and CIP plan. And then following the public hearing, staff will provide an overview of the revenue forecast for the next biennium and beyond, the budget process, and also information that will help inform the development of the 2025-2026 operating budget and our capital investment plan, which is a 10-year plan. So joining at the table, we have John Risha, our Chief Financial Officer, and Evan Phillips, Financial Strategy and Performance Director. And with that, I will turn it over to John.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, tonight is an informational only event. We are here to support the public hearing, which is the first of three on your 25-26 budget process. And then as acting city manager shared, we'll then go into some updates on the forecast and approach. Tonight, as we go into that public hearing, the goal of tonight's public hearing, which is early in the process before you have received any kind of a preliminary proposal, is designed to solicit input from community members on interests and ideas as you're beginning to think about those things and provide us with guidance and get us prepared for going into the great work of the summer. As we're thinking about things tonight, from a calendar perspective, we're here for the public hearing and budget workshop, which traditionally takes place about this time each biennium. We are anticipating September 17th, bringing forward the acting city manager's preliminary budget proposal. And then September 24th, public hearing on that initial proposal. go through the month of October, where we would be discussing with you the different kinds of proposals within that, going in a little deeper, walking you through some of those pieces to make sure that you are comfortable, give you great opportunity for deliberation. And then around November 12th would be our final public hearing based off of your feedback, get final direction from you. And if all goes well, we might be able to prepare a final budget for adoption and consideration November 19th, which would be a week before Thanksgiving. It seems so far away, but yet it is coming so very quickly. And with that, Madam Mayor, we'll turn back to you for the public hearing.
So as you said, this is the first of many conversations, and we're actually going to hear from the public before we hear from ourselves. So that starts tonight with a public hearing, and so I ask that we have a motion to open the public hearing.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, City Clerk, do we have people signed up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Tonight there are 20 pre-registered speakers for tonight's public hearings. Before I start calling names, I will let the council know that you did receive 4 written communications or comments for this public hearing. Those have been included in your desk packet and were also directly emailed to you. And with that, I will call our first name, who is Jonah Kowal.
So we have, how many, 20 people signed up?
20, yes.
Everybody gets up to 3 minutes, but you don't have to use all that time if you don't need it, so welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. I'm Jonah Cole. For much of my life, I've lived in the Cougar Mountain area of Bellevue. Up until last month, I was attending Sammamish High School, and I'm excited to attend UW in the fall for computer science, hoping to return to Bellevue when I can. A few years ago, I had no interest in local politics or policy. If you had told me then that I'd testify to city council, I wouldn't have believed you. But owning a bike has completely changed the way I see Bellevue. It allowed me to slow down, take in the city's details, and discover parts of Bellevue that I'd never have stumbled upon otherwise. Biking has made it easier to check out neat alleys, businesses, or parks on a whim without worrying about parking. And through biking, I've visited more of the Puget Sound area than ever before. From Renton via East Rail, Seattle, Mercer Island, Issaquah, and Snoqualmie via the I-90 trails, Redmond via the 520 trail, Woodinville and Bothell via the Sammamish River Trail, and so many more. Biking has really changed the way I see life. But biking has also vested my safety in your policy. That's why I'm here today to urge you to protect vulnerable road users like myself and many others. Not just to save lives, but to encourage more Bellevue residents to get out there and walk, bike, or roll. I know firsthand how a change of perspective can shape how you see the city around you. Because ultimately, bike and pedestrian infrastructure is not just transportation infrastructure. It's recreation infrastructure. It's community building infrastructure. It's civic engagement infrastructure. In this upcoming budget, I urge you to consider the impact substantial bike and pedestrian infrastructure could have on Bellevue. I'd also like to stress that the best time to act on this was yesterday, but that the second best time to get this infrastructure in is today. No matter how temporary it is, safety infrastructure will save lives and prevent injuries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Andrew Pardo.
Good evening, Council, Deputy Mayor, Mayor. I'm Andrew Pardo. I live at 10915 Southeast First on the southern border of downtown. I've lived in Bellevue for 25 years, and I work for Meta in the Spring District. I thank the Council, your predecessors, and the city staff for the good work you've done. As you consider the next city budget, I urge you to embrace a bold vision. One vision that we've had for many years is Vision Zero. We are now 6 years out from our deadline. We've done a lot of analysis, a lot of outreach, suffered a bit of politicking, and we've made some progress. We need to urgently deliver on safety infrastructure like street crossings and bike lanes. We've seen that our automobile infrastructure does not scale. Look out the window at 5 o'clock any night. We need to make walking and rolling safe and comfortable. We need to make it a competitive alternative to driving through our city. Another vision that we've had for many years is equitable housing for all. Despite our good intentions, we are growing much more slowly than our neighbors, especially Kirkland, Redmond, Seattle. Bellevue is the center of the East Side and an important hub for housing and jobs. We need our housing to accommodate our city's growth. And frankly, we need more housing to stop commutes from the exurbs. Housing is a transportation problem. Transportation is a housing problem. We are not doing well on either. I appreciate the work that the city has done, but I don't really feel well represented. We limit our housing development to luxury housing through many reasons, but also parking minimums, as Kevin Wallace pointed out a few years back. Biking in our city has a well-earned reputation of being dangerous. Walking in our city is slow due to long superblocks and even longer light cycles, especially north-south. When we allocate funds, we need to measure the impact of our efforts, not the activity of studies and community reach-outs. Ultimately, it's results that matter. I support the council spending my tax dollars to make Bellevue a better place to live, a better place to walk, a better place to get around without a car. And I support an additional sales tax levy to generate revenue for transportation, provided that those transportation projects aren't just more of the same Bellevue that was famously built for cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alice Ming.
Hi, my name is Alice Mang. I'm with People for Climate Action. I'm here today because of the critical need to fund stronger city actions that would address greenhouse gas emissions across Bellevue. A brief recap. In 2014, Bellevue, along with many other cities in King County, joined the K4C, committing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 and by 80% by 2050. 2019 to 2020, our city developed an updated environmental stewardship plan. However, the city's yearly greenhouse gas emissions record shows that the plan does not significantly progress us towards our city's emissions commitments. We are now a decade after committing to the K4C goals and not on track to hit either the 2030 or 2050 emissions commitments. More urgent action that PCA believes is within the city's capabilities is required to get us on track. The city knows that transportation and buildings make up more than 90% of the emissions and is where our efforts should be focused. Fossil fuel consumption in buildings, primarily natural gas use in homes, makes up 20% of all current emissions. Additionally, transportation sector emissions are growing more rapidly than other pieces of the emissions pie. In both cases, bold city actions could promote a rapid transition off of fossil fuels. While taking action may seem daunting, keep in mind recent polling by Yale University shows that 84% of folks in King County know that climate change is human-caused and are concerned about it. The recent increase in environmental stewardship funding enabled our city to add much-needed staffing. However, our city needs to more boldly fund new impactful programs and also beef up funding for energy-smart East Side work in Bellevue. My colleague Court Olson will talk about the kind of bold funding our city needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Court Olson.
Good evening, friends. Mayor Robinson, council members, and City Manager Carlson. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm with People for Climate Action, of course. I'd like to talk about the 2020 Sustainability Plan as a plan that lacks the teeth that we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and hit those targets that you folks have committed to. Perhaps that's because of the limited staff and budget that was available in 2020. In 2021, People for Climate Action shared our research of a few U.S. cities of comparable size that showed some were spending much, much more on sustainability work and staffing. And thankfully, you and the city staff recognized what we were saying and listened. And in the 2022-23 budget, you've provided enough funding for the additional staff that have been hired. So we now have a total of 8, which is great, but it's still a work in progress. This year, just 3 years since our 2021 research of U.S. cities, we found dramatic growth in sustainability budgets and staffing in several comparably sized cities. We found 2 that have twice the budget expenditure on sustainability than Bellevue, and we found 3 that have triple the spending that Bellevue has on sustainability. And all but one of these comparably sized cities has a budget as large, or none of them have a budget as large as Bellevue except for one. So just to give you an example of what is needed, I want to talk about Energy Smart East Side real quickly. Climate data shows, or city data shows, that there are 23,000 gas furnaces in Bellevue right now. Last year, the Energy Smart East Side program helped 60 homeowners change from gas to heat pumps. The recent state grant will help increase that number, but only slightly. There are 1,200 furnaces that need replacement every year in Bellevue. So we really have to ramp that up. And by our estimate, a program to do that would cost about $5.7 million. There are other things that we see that need to be done and included in a new sustainability program. We could easily see an annual expenditure of $10 million to get to the 2030 and 2050 greenhouse gas reduction goals that we've set. And we've got to start now. Time's ticking away. So please add to the budget. Thank you.
Chris Marks.
Good evening. I'm Chris Marks, and along with Court and Alice, I'm a member of People for Climate Action. I want to remind you the really significant message that Alice was delivering to you. You know, when a young person moves to Bellevue and begins their adult life, they're not only seeking all the usual attractive elements of a place, but they're also seeking a commitment to the future. A city or region with a stable future used to mean it had a healthy job market and a reasonable city services. But in 2024, it also means it has a plan to protect the health and well-being of its citizens in a changing natural world where we all participate and depend upon it. To a young person like my friend Alice, there is a future in Bellevue in part because we made a commitment to the changing climate. A decade ago, the Bellevue leaders joined with their regional colleagues and committed to those K4C goals that are just as ambitious and just as essential today as they were in 2014. I mean, we've gone from a region without a need for air conditioning to having this robust effort involving our primary energy provider to cool our buildings while we lower greenhouse gas emissions in those same buildings. We've gone from loving our natural environment for its beauty and grandeur to scrambling to defend that natural environment because we've learned that that environment is protecting us by sucking up carbon and creating shade to lower our temperatures. We've gone from believing that the marketplace will take care of every problem we have and accept that folks and have come to understand that folks need help reducing their carbon footprints. Many Bellevue residents need help just to learn and understand what are the smart things they should do to make the transition to a clean, sustainable future. Quite a few folks in Bellevue also need financial incentive and assistance to make transition happen. Federal and state funds are good, but they're never going to be enough. For example, as Court just mentioned, even with the state grant recently, there's much more funding we need to scale up the Energy Smart East Side to the necessary and impactful level that the citizenry is interested in. Bellevue should fill these gaps for its current and its future citizens. By making investments in key sustainability programs in Bellevue, we would be honoring our continued commitment to a brighter future. Thank you.
Jared Sager.
Hello. This is my first time speaking and being in this beautiful building. So I've been living in Bellevue for 3 years, working at Microsoft up in Redmond. I live in a pretty ideal spot to commute by bike, which is my main form of transportation from downtown Bellevue to Redmond, and I'm very lucky for that. I've been enjoying it for the last year and a half or so. And I wanted to touch on something that a couple others talked about as well, the Vision Zero plan, which I think is a beautiful vision for making our streets, more diverse in terms of how people get around and safe. So right now, I don't feel like Bellevue is sufficient to convince current drivers that they can move away from using their cars and have that not be a significant compromise to their mobility and to how they get around. But I think that we could get there, and I'd really love to see that prioritized in the budget with rapid expansion of bike lanes and protected ones especially. So even with my ideal route over the 520 trail to work, there are a couple sections that are still very stressful, where I have to contend with cars, or a bike lane suddenly disappears and I have to merge, which can be kind of dangerous. I've been hit once, not injured, thankfully. That's really all I had to say. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you. Cameron Cast.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cameron Cass, and I live, work, commute, and recreate in Bellevue. And as we look at our city budget, I'm here to express the importance and urgency of Vision Zero. Nearly every day, I ride my bike and take transit in Bellevue to commute to work from my home in Bridle Trails to downtown Bellevue. Because of these previous investments in transit and cycling infrastructure, me and my wife have been able to live car light since moving to Bellevue, a decision that has improved my life immensely. However, I wouldn't have been able to start if it wasn't safe. City leaders have promised to achieve Vision Zero, the goal to have 0 serious injuries or deaths on our city streets by 2030. While this is a commendable goal, this is just over 5 years away, and progress around Vision Zero has stagnated in recent years. The trend line of deaths and serious injuries has remained flat over the last decade, and in 2023 alone, 27 people were killed or seriously injured on Bellevue streets. The need for immediate implementation of essential bicycle, transit, and pedestrian infrastructure in our city cannot be overstated. Delays spanning 10 to 20 years not only escalate costs, adding a burden on Bellevue taxpayers and to the city budget, but obstruct the mobility of our most vulnerable populations. Despite representing more than 5% of traffic incidents in Bellevue, pedestrians, cyclists, and other non-motorized travelers are disproportionately affected and account for nearly half of all the collisions that result in serious injuries or fatalities. This disparity highlights the need to implement infrastructure that safeguards all road users with the highest priority. Any number of deaths on our city streets is unacceptable, no matter the mode of transportation. People should be able to move through our fine city safely. Reaching Vision Zero goals is going to take a significant amount of planning and investment, and this budget cycle is the chance for us to choose what we will fund, and will decide if Bellevue becomes a city where the only acceptable number of deaths on our infrastructure is 0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Putter Burt, who's joining us virtually. Ms. Burt, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Robinson, esteemed City Council members, and Bellevue City staff members. My name is Putter Burt, and I am the President and CEO of Kids Quest Children's Museum. As many of you know, 20 years ago, we opened in Factoria Mall in less than 10,000 square feet. 8 years ago, we expanded and relocated downtown in the former Rosalie Weil Museum of Doll Art and 17,000 square feet. We currently support 43 full-time staff members. Tonight, I am here requesting $20 million to be included in the budget to support Kids Quest Children's Museum 3.0 for a new 40,000 square foot building where art and science will collide. Today, we serve over 200,000 people annually. However, we continue to turn away people for programs, camps, birthday parties, special events, and general admissions. We are currently looking at partnering with SRM Development to build a brand new 40,000 square foot children's museum with 46 units of affordable housing on the upper 3 floors of the building. We would be creating a landmark building, one of the first of its kind, serving the families of our community and adding the much-needed affordable housing. This would be located at 118th next to Greenbaum's and the Public Storage Building, right down the street from the Pacific Science Center's Mercer Slough Center. This would allow us to better serve our community and to stay in Bellevue. We need to secure $30 million by the end of Q1 2025 to commit to this project. We understand that this is a huge ask and look forward to working with you to make this dream become a reality. We want to continue to provide a safe and supportive learning place for children and families. We work to create a space that is welcoming to everyone and no one is turned away because of their inability to pay. We are hoping that our proven track record and our commitment to our community will help you consider supporting us at this time. I will leave you with one great fun fact. To date, we have served over 2.9 million visitors, and I think that's pretty cool. Thank you all.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Connor Hansen, who I believe is also joining us virtually. But Mr. Hansen, I don't see you identified. Can you please use the raise hand function? Okay, I'm going to temporarily go on to the next speaker, which is Tim Motz. And Mr. Motz, can you hear me? Mr. Motz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I was just checking. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you. Your time begins now.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Council, and esteemed staff for City of Bellevue. This is my first opportunity and time ever getting a chance to address the council. I am doing so remotely right now while on a family trip, but it's so important to me and to the thousands of youth in our community that I get a chance to speak tonight. And I just first want to applaud you all as staff, council, and everyone that you are working with on this very concerted effort to understand the needs of our community and those families that are not able to be up at that podium tonight. For me, this weighs heavy on me. I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of the thousands of families who aren't able to come tonight to be able to speak to you all. This budget is going to be vital to so many people through the various nonprofits that are supported by not only the Boys and Girls Club, but others doing tremendous work in the community. We are making a significant request as the Boys and Girls Club of Bellevue. That's because we have thousands of families, specifically those on the Lake Hills corridor, who simply have nowhere else to go after school. It's no secret that over 75% of our members, of which there are 16,000 of them, are members of color who simply do not have a lot of other affordable options. Our clubhouses, while there's 18 of them across our community, 14 of them are in our communities east of I-405. And the reality is they can't access the beautiful downtown facility that you all partnered with us on several years ago. We're very proud of the work that we did on the Lake Hills Clubhouse, converting the old library. And now we have 10,000 square feet that our board, club, and community invested in to make sure it was a reality for over 200 kids to be registered there and to enjoy those services. Several of you have come to see that facility and see our different organizational sites that we have throughout Bellevue. I just wanted to reinforce the fact that this is one of the most seminal moments in Bellevue's history where we have a chance to invest in a very significant way for those families that are the least lost and left out. I know we'll have many times to be able to speak about this over the next several months, but I wanted to just reinforce that I feel like you were on the right track, talking to the community who needs it most about what services are necessary for them as we all work to provide life-saving services for those families. Thank you so much. I know we'll have several other opportunities to speak on this topic, but I wanted to thank you all for taking these families into your heads and into your hearts as you think about the upcoming budget. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ruth Lipscomb.
Hello, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, and council members. My name is Ruth Lipscomb, and I've lived in South Bellevue like nearly forever. There are two areas that I'm especially interested in asking you to fund in next year's budget. Both relate to keeping Bellevue a really livable and wonderful place for all its residents. I'll start with a shorter ask. Please fund enforcement of Bellevue's great new tree codes. Thank you for your approval of the codes in tonight's consent calendar. Now please enforce them with a 24/7 reporting system. A little enforcement will go a long way to bring confidence to our residents that their concerns about illegal tree removals have been addressed. My second request is bigger. It's support for Vision Zero. This was a commitment that the city made almost a decade ago to protect the lives of those who walk and ride bicycles and roll everywhere in Bellevue. But time is running out to meet that 2030 deadline. As you develop the budget, I urge you to fund improvements for as many dangerous corridors as possible, as quickly as possible, using rapid prototyping and rollout. This will be the most cost-effective and efficient way to save and protect the most lives at the lowest cost. Even using money wisely, you'll still need additional funding in order to get to Vision Zero. You have an available source that has been untapped by Bellevue, but is being used by our neighboring cities to fund transportation projects. Please use that taxing authority to raise the $10 million per year to speed up multimodal improvements. Once the city reaches Vision Zero and there are safe routes everywhere, you can let that tax go away. Thank you for your work, and I look forward to seeing the preliminary budget.
The next speaker is Yuan Ming Zhao.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, council members, and staff. I'm Yuan, and I'm a resident of Overlake who works at Microsoft and who takes the 2 line to visit Bellevue. When I first moved here in 2020, I was nearly hit one Saturday morning by an SUV and a pickup truck racing down Bell Red Road. Though Bell Red Road hasn't seemed to change much since then, I noticed that Overlake roads, such as 152nd Avenue Northeast, feel much more approachable now as a pedestrian. And I'm also happy at the advanced pedestrian green and all-way pedestrian lights I see in Bellevue downtown. In fact, it is these features, such as reliable public transportation and feeling safe at crossings, that incentivize me to visit Bellevue and spend money here in the first place. And speaking of visiting Bellevue, I am here this evening to encourage Council to allocate more budget and effort towards achieving Vision Zero by 2030. Because when visitors and residents feel safe, they walk around more and find more shops to throw money at. And I get it. 2030 implies a deadline, and deadlines easily can lead to anxiety and procrastination. But I believe that through increased budget and effort, that even if we don't end up making it by 2030, that we still will have made uncountably many more steps towards it than we would have otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Scott Aldridge.
Hello, Council. My name is Scott Aldridge. I've worked at Microsoft and I went to school here. I wanted to echo the statements made by my fellow members of Eastside Urbanism and Livable Kirkland in encouraging you to invest in more bike infrastructure. Specifically, I wanted to bring attention the imperfect linkage on the bike paths to commercial structures, specifically the new train station by the hospital as it links to the East Rail bike path. It brings it directly to the west side of the Wajimaya grocery store. And what should be a 2.5 minute walk from that train station turns into about a 15-minute endeavor to get to that grocery store. And that's a very big deal on the shape and size of the walk shed around those train stations to allow people to live a car-free lifestyle and reduce the amount of trips generated from housing. Yeah. Again, thank you very much for your investment in Project Zero.
Thank you. The next speaker is Deidre Clayton. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next speaker, who is Betsy Humber. She's joining us virtually. Ms. Humber, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Your time begins now.
Thank you. I am Betsy Hummer. I live right next to Bellevue College. I'm a lifelong Bellevue resident. Thank you, council and staff, for your dedication and nonpartisan, careful approach to the budget, which will improve our city going forward. Last year, I spoke with numerous residents and businesses throughout Bellevue. They all love being in Bellevue, just like we are. I grew up here, and it's wonderful to see so many more people. There were only 64,000 people when I lived here, enjoying the Bellevue that I grew up in. For the budget, public safety, traffic, transportation, and parks are the most important concerns of the people of Bellevue that I talked with throughout last year. They want to feel safe, they want to get to where they need to be easily, and they love their parks and they want to enjoy their recreation. They are also concerned about being priced out of their homes due to increased taxes and the cost of living. I am asking you to carefully look at the general budget. Law enforcement and public safety need to be top of mind and top of the budget expenditures. Our force needs to keep pace with our growth before the growth actually happens. Public safety must be the budget priority, and it must be sustainable so that at the next economic downturn, patrols are not cut. When we had the bike patrol cut, that impacted the most vulnerable among us because those officers are trained to reach out to the people not in a car, but on their bikes and on their foot. Talking to the people throughout Bellevue, traffic congestion reduction and transportation must also be at the top of the general budget. Safety depends on making sure our infrastructure, what we currently have and currently works, remains safe and maintained and improved for all modes of transportation. Bellevue should not have to be double taxed just to fill the potholes and to replace the curbs and sidewalks. Not to mention the street improvements. You know, we're a city in a park, and a lot of that depends on the street trees, and we need to get rid of those blackberries. Also, our parks, we have 2 parks levies, and again, I don't feel that Bellevue should be double taxed just on their parks, which is an essential city service. I believe that should come out of the general budget or the general fund, and it should be first of mind. That's what the people in Bellevue are looking for. And I think all of the other, those are the 3 most important: public safety, traffic, and parks. Thank you very much, and thanks for your commitment and dedication to Bellevue.
Ben Mickle.
Hello, my name is Ben Mickle, and I live in downtown Bellevue. I'm speaking today to voice my support for continued investments in transportation safety projects. According to Bellevue's Vision Zero data, there hasn't been a pedestrian or bicycle fatality on our city streets since 2020. I think that's a great achievement, and it demonstrates how impactful your Vision Zero efforts have been. I've personally noticed the improvements over the years: the leading pedestrian interval, the mid-block crossings with median islands, new sidewalks, the protected bike lanes and bike signals, the intersections with pedestrian scrambles, and more. These projects aren't just reducing fatalities, they're also improving the daily quality of life in our city. The city staff has done an excellent job on the new speed management plan, and I'm looking forward to seeing it put into action with your funding. I also support the continued expansion of our network of bike lanes, especially focusing on connecting residential areas to light rail stations. There's one project near me from a few years ago that I want to highlight as a good model. It's the painted curb extensions done at the all-way stop on Main Street in Old Bellevue. This project has simplified the intersection for drivers and reduced the pedestrian crossing distance. But what really makes it so smart is that it was done with just paint and plastic posts. That means it was done quickly, at low cost, and it would have been very easy to modify if any issues had come up. I've heard people refer to this style of project as rapid build, and I think it's a good tool that we should use a lot more. The data shows that Bellevue is already a regional leader in traffic safety, but by putting adequate funding behind our existing plans, Bellevue can become a national leader that inspires other cities to eliminate serious injuries on our roads. Thank you.
Thank you. Abraham Wilner Martin.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. I have addressed you all before, both in transportation meetings and here in the council chambers, typically just as a third-generation inhabitant of Bellevue. I love my city very much. However, tonight I am also speaking to you in my capacity as a PCO for the 41st LD. Recently, at a meeting, or rather after
I'm going to stop you just for a minute because we have rules about things like this, so let me make sure.
Not in official capacity, but as someone who is invested in my community in that capacity.
Okay, hold on for just a second. Do we have any conflict of interest talking about legislative districts and things like that?
I don't think so, Mayor. I think he could speak up to this.
As long as it's not campaign related or?
No.
Okay, great, sorry.
My issue here tonight is an issue of what this budget represents to the people who I am trying to reach, which is primarily people of my generation. I was recently asked how we convince people who are generally apathetic to the political process of the importance of voting and getting involved and being part of the civic process. And the only answer that I had for the person asking was that we have to demonstrate to these people that this process actually does things that benefit both them and their families and their communities. That is a hard thing to sell to some people because for a lot of these people, they look around and they see a lot of promises that are not kept. They see a lot of people saying that they will help and not any help actually coming their way. I am here to wholeheartedly support funding in full our Vision Zero proposals. It is not hard to see how this will impact young people. Most young people today don't own cars. Many of them don't even have a license. It is expensive to drive. It is difficult to drive. It is scary to drive. Many people my age don't want to do it. Investing in bike infrastructure is an easy way to demonstrate to these people that you are interested in supporting them, in supporting young people, in supporting people who actually live their lives here in Bellevue. It can be difficult sometimes to separate the political from government, but I think we can all agree that it is very important that young people have some level of faith that our government works and is there to help them. And this is by far the easiest possible hurdle to jump in convincing them of that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Marie Dooley.
My name is Anne-Marie Dooley. I'm a doctor at Overlake and a board member of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members, thank you for allowing me tonight to speak in support of the budget and fully funding Bike Bellevue and Vision Zero. But I'm also here specifically to counter some misinformation that bike lanes will increase emergency response times. So back in the spring, I approached Overlake to come out in support of Bike Bellevue and Vision Zero. They're mandated to do that in a way to support anything that will improve public health, and they did. But imagine my surprise that 4 days later, they came out and said they were incredibly concerned about bike lanes reducing emergency response times. So I reached out to the current head of Medic One, Dr. Michael Sayer, sat down with him, very knowledgeable guy. He has a lot of experience as head of Medic One with bike lanes that are already installed all over the Puget Sound, which is the reach of Medic One. And he was not concerned at all that bike lanes increase emergency response times. Now, as a former Medic One doctor myself, I'm very aware of the importance of response times, having had to arrange emergency responses from Alaska to Port Angeles when I was at Harborview. So I also reached out to a fire department lieutenant, sat down with him and asked him also whether he was concerned that bike lanes increased response times. And I don't want to shock the council, but his response to Overlake's concerns started with the word bull and ended in the word tea. He said basically that bike lanes are no different than their responses that they have to deal with on the freeway. And finally, I reached out to my old mentor, Dr. Michael Kopis, who created the entire Medic One response system in this region. Our response times would not be the best in the country without Dr. Kopis. And he said to me, and he's concerned, extremely concerned, that his legendary response times are being used as a reason not to address Vision Zero and to build bike lanes and to address our climate crisis. So with all due respect to Overlake administration, they're wrong, and they know they are. I'm asking you to fully fund and support Bike Bellevue, and also to address our climate crisis, which is more visible to us every single day. And not just for the future, but just for the present. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christopher Randalls.
Oh my gosh, sorry. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, council members and staff. Chris Randalls, and I'm speaking tonight not just for our organization, Complete Streets Bellevue, but for the 10 organizations that are urging your body to take bold Vision Zero action through this budget process. Our org's missions may be different, from advancing racial equity to supporting safe streets, to ensuring a sustainable environment and more, but we stand united in our sincere belief that Bellevue can and must achieve 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries on its city streets by 2030. Our coalition recognizes the intersections between ensuring everyone can get around the city safely and keeping our emissions down, or between building bike and transit infrastructure to support a more equitable and accessible city. This is why our groups authored and submitted a joint letter to your body last night with our requests for this year's budget cycle. And if there's one top line that we'd implore you to take from our joint action, it's that there is immense appetite for Bellevue to proceed rapidly with the deployment of critical safety infrastructure. Our city staff have done excellent work over multiple years to study, design, and plan for facilities that can be built rapidly to both meet Bellevue's multimodal mobility challenges and address crucial safety needs on the city's busiest streets. It's this work that has shown us that 83% of fatal and serious injury collisions happen on just 8% of Bellevue streets. It's this work that has, over several years, studied and designed rapid build bicycle infrastructure that would lower speeds, support environmental stewardship goals, and improve safety for everyone traversing a corridor. And it's this work that, through lengthy and meticulous community outreach, has developed over 300 proposals for projects that would improve road safety near schools, protecting young children, our most vulnerable road users. Our organizations value the hard work and planning that's been done, but now is the time for action. Now is the time to do as much as we can with what we have, to vet and fully fund those tactical safety projects to protect our kids, to implement the best practice, rapid solutions on our high injury streets that we know work to both increase safety while also increasing mobility options for all who travel through Bellevue. We also believe that now is the time to grow what we have, to use our city's state-granted authority to raise funds for infrastructure improvements for people walking, biking, rolling, and taking transit. Bellevue has been doing so much, and we are sincerely appreciative. But unfortunately, our progress is stalled. Our trend line is flat. In 2023, 27 people were seriously injured or lost their life on a Bellevue street. To rephrase the classic maxim, if we want to see different results, we must do something different. Please use this budget process to do something different. Please use this budget process to do something more. Thank you.
Thank you. We have reached the end of our pre-registered list, and our final speaker is Alex Zimmerman.
Thank you. Don't steal my time.
Mr. Zimmerman, I'm going to tell you that if you do not speak to the budget, if you take this time to insult people, I'm going to stop you.
It's okay, no problem. I will talk about budget and only money. Only don't steal my time. I love money. I'm a Jew. I love money. I understand how money operates. This I doing this for all my life. Sie heil my dirty damn Nazi fascist junta in anti-Semite. My name is Alex Zimmerman, and I want to speak about budget, about money, and about money what is spent for crime. It's very critical money what is spent for crime, because I absolutely best expert in Bellevue probably with this situation. You prosecute me 4 times. It's a pure political prosecution because I only one dissident in state Washington for last lifetime. Yeah, exactly. So I want to explain to you each what is you prosecute me cost a money. It's nothing for free. Right now you prosecute me. It's all fraud. This will be jury trial, will be everything like I did before 3 times. It's all cost money. Why? Because I have different opinion, because you don't like me for different reason. I give you one example. Second time in 12 you prosecute me. Case cost $150,000. You spend $150,000 for prosecute me. $150,000 for 2 weeks jury trial. And policeman Harsh die in this money too. Guys, you understand about your talking? You acting like a bandita, like a Nazi, like a Gestapo. That's exactly who you are. Why you prosecute me 4 times? Are you forgot how much this cost? We have too many criminal around. Yeah? Policeman, chief of policemen don't know about this? So fabricate case, each time when you prosecute me, it's cost money, a ton of money. You understand about your talking? Or you don't understand? Because you not care about this, not money of your package, it's money from us package. You cannot prosecute idiotic political prosecution. I'm not a Trump, but he's my boss. You prosecute him 4 times. You know how much it costs? $1 million and $1 million. My prosecution don't cost $1 million and $1 million. But for city like Bellevue, probably a couple $100,000 is too much money. What is we could spend fighting real criminal, you know what it mean? And policemen acting like a piece of garbage, you know what it mean? Why they doing this? Because you order them doing this. Is this a key what as I talk to you right now? We need talking about money. We cannot talk about money because you don't understand how money operate. It's a problem. I know this guy from King Country. He very smart man. But you need to stop and spend money for nothing. This is exactly $1 million and $1 million what is you spend. And I will talk about this many times before. We will talk now. Thank you very much.
Okay, as I said, that was the end of our pre-registered list. So at this point, I would ask if there is anyone else joining us in council chambers who would like to speak, or anyone online, please use the raise hand function. Nice, do you see Mr. Belka and another gentleman, but Mr. Belka?
Sorry, everyone, I slipped in a bit late, but I'm happy to get a chance to talk. Nice to see everyone again. Nice thing about coming at the end is like, wow, everybody already said a lot of really, really good things. As you know, Eastside Urbanism, I actually personally signed on the letter from Complete Street Bellevue about how important it is that we freely use this budget to fund Vision Zero. And one of the really interesting things about Vision Zero is it's all about like the safe systems approach, and it's about how we design our systems to keep our people safe. And usually, you know, we think a lot about like the systems, like our transportation systems, but this is a system here too. And this is Bellevue's system, and it's working. I know that each of you care deeply about keeping our residents safe. You've shown your commitment. You've come out, you've looked, you've gone on bike rides, you've looked at the roads. We care together about making this safe. We've had people come and speak today. This is our system working. We've got a new transportation commissioner who I'm sure is going to work very hard to uphold Vision Zero by 2030, because that is the goal that you've set. And so the budget is the chance to empower them. This is our system working. This is a crucial part of the complete Vision Zero Safe Systems approach. We can't just say we're going to do the things. We got to back it up with the money. And we're really talking about our neighbors, our friends. For all of you that have come out, thank you so much. You got to see some of the different people in Bellevue and who live around Bellevue, but come to Bellevue, whether it's for work or for shopping or all the wonderful things we have here. And it's very sad. Today there was a report on North Up. It seems like somebody was on a bike and they may have been hit. And we were just on North Up, some of us. Like, this is an important quarter, connecting some of the investments that we've already put, millions and millions of dollars into. Some of us, we were out looking at the new Northeast 8th Bridge and the East Rail. East Rail's huge, 520 Trail is huge. People are using these things that we've put so much money into. And so we need to make sure that we close all the gaps to keep everyone safe in between too. We can't fully utilize these amazing investments, this amazing infrastructure we've built, unless we go all the way through, we follow through. This is the full system. So thank you so much for all of your attention to Vision Zero, safety, pedestrians, cyclists, drivers. Thank you very much. Oh, and the great work on Transit K too. So I look forward to seeing how you use the budget to make sure that we really move forward with these really, really important projects. Good to see everyone. Thank you.
I believe it was Mr. Siegel's hand I also saw. Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly note the important impact of public safety on just about everything that's been discussed today. For example, to avoid fatalities or injuries for bicyclists and pedestrians, it's very important that drivers obey the traffic laws. And unfortunately, many drivers won't do that unless there is a fear and a concern that they may be punished if they do not. And so having a well-funded and a motivated police department is really a necessity if we are going to drive down those injuries and fatalities. And of course, with mass transit, there's been a big investment in mass transit. People won't ride it if they don't feel safe walking to it and walking from it and while they're on it. And so again, in order to fully utilize the investment in mass transit, we need to have safe streets. And I feel like so far, Bellevue is quite a safe community. There's not a great deal of fear of crime here, and I hope we can keep it that way. Thank you.
I believe that was the end of the hands, Mayor, so I'll turn it back to you to close. Oh, we do have one more. Go ahead. If you could state your name for the record when you come up.
Good afternoon, Council and City staff. My name is Noreen Breyer. It's an honor to be addressing you tonight. We've heard a lot of incredible initiatives that should be prioritized when we're talking about city budget. I'd like to talk about one element that hasn't been spoken about. I work on ethics and AI at Meta, and I lecture at our local retirement center here in Bellevue, and I also support genocide survivors through my NGO. Having moved to Bellevue 3 years ago, I am fortunate to call this place my home. Although I'm not an elected official, I have an exciting vision and proposal to share with you today. I've analyzed a lot of Bellevue's voting demographic and noticed that voters tend to skew older. This means there's a gap in younger generations in how they vote or even pay attention to local politics. Unfortunately, to Gen Z, my age group, and the younger generation, politics and city involvement has become a little bit corny. And unfortunately, I can sometimes understand that sentiment. Now I ask you to imagine Paris, France. People around the world visit France because leaders of the fashion industry gather for Paris Fashion Week. And London, you can walk past any cigar house where Winston Churchill strategized against Nazi Germany. Now I want to propose Bellevue Inspire Week, an annual event where we gather a world leader, an artist, and a tech leader to deliver keynote speeches and host interactive engagements. This event can and will foster an intergenerational space for people of all ages and background. I have already reached out to Malala Yousafzai's team, who's offered to be able to bring her to speak at an event like this if it is approved. I've also reached out to my alumni network so I can set up time with Nancy Carell, who plays Carol in the famous TV show The Office. I've already spoken to a few Netflix comedians as well, and if we secure a venue, we can invite various local leaders, comedians, and artists. Actually, one of my students at the Senior Citizens Center is actually quite excited to audition as an opener. Plus, I think it's great publicity for the city of Bellevue. And I can also imagine that this would strengthen ties with the Bellevue community, especially from the younger demographic that isn't involved in local politics or moreover our city. Never mind talking about the businesses and how much this will boost the local economy. So by bringing together diverse minds and talent, something like Bellevue Inspire Week could become a significant global cultural and intellectual hub, showcasing the city as a forward-thinking and vibrant place to live and visit. And I asked that you take this proposal seriously and consider allocating part of our budget towards this initiative. Thank you.
Okay, one more. If you can also state your name for the record first.
Okay, so I'm Evan Lee, and I'm supporting Vision Zero and more multimodal transport. I'll have a short story here. When I was a child, I saw that my parents were working really hard, and I didn't want to be a burden to them. I already had disabilities, and I felt guilty having them ferry me between school and activities. I decided I would just stay home and limit my activities, and that significantly compromised my independence growing up. Many years later, I learned that my limited mobility as a child prevented me from helping my parents independently. And this limited mobility comes from car dependency. I see this in Bellevue right now, but I'm hopeful that we will be able to fix this. I'm advocating for the infrastructure, Vision Zero and multimodal transport, and the programs that will empower children to be more mobile and independent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we have reached the end.
Okay.
Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, so is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's have staff up here and we'll get to your presentation and we can have questions or discussion.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. At this time, I want to do two things. First, I want to acknowledge that in the audience tonight are a majority of your department heads who are also listening in on this, and I just do want to acknowledge my colleagues all being here tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Phillips to take us into the forecast.
Thank you, John. So before we go into the forecast itself, I do want to take a moment to walk through our 2024 amended budget resources. So what we're looking here at the slide are the resources that we have. So resources are cash on hand, other reserves, as well as the revenues that we take in on an annual basis. So one of the things that we'll be spending most of our time talking about later on is our taxes. So this will be focusing on a tax forecast. And that amount is roughly 23% or $344 million of our total resource pie. We also have a group that we're calling, for lack of a better term, other. That's 16% or $217 million. And that's a whole host of different things. Contributions from other funds. So that's when we pay ourselves for the services, whether IT or HR, to other parts of the city. Interlocal contributions are exactly what it sounds like. Miscellaneous revenue is a wide range of revenue sources. It is literally hundreds of lines of revenue, from everything from red light cameras to marijuana proceeds and bingo cards. We have other financing, and I do want to call out our state and local grants. They represent $27 million or 2% of our total resource pie. We have charges for services, which are a little under $100 million. DS license and permit fees are about 1% of our budget, or $19 million. Utility rates and fees, and this goes for not only the operations of our utilities, but also the long-term maintenance of our infrastructure, and that is $240 million, or 16%. And then we have our beginning fund balance. So this is our resources and cash on hand. This is our rainy day, but a large chunk of this is for anticipated replacement and maintenance of our utilities infrastructure. That is a large chunk of that amount of money. So again, this is our 2024 amended resources that was included in our mid-biennium adjustment. The 2024 tax sources, again, we're going to be focusing on taxes tonight. I'm going to start at the top and then work my way clockwise. So our motor vehicle fuel tax is a relatively small portion of our budget. It's 1% or $3 million. We also have our utilities taxes. So this is not the utilities that you may pay on your Bellevue utilities bill. This is the taxes that we charge to ourselves as we have a utility within the city, or utilities within the city, I should say, and then other large utilities in the region, think gas and electric. Our property taxes are made up of a variety of component parts. We have our regular levy, which is exactly how it sounds. It is our base levy. Every city has a regular levy that is the base levy. It doesn't have any lifts. It's not for any particular purpose. It's for all general government purposes. Beyond that, we have the voted levies. We have our parks levy that passed in 1988, which is $4 million. Our mobility and fire levies that I believe passed in 2016, and they are about $8 and $9 million a piece. And then our most recent property tax levy, which is the 2022 parks levy at $21 million a year, or 6% of our taxes. Again, all of these property taxes combined are about 26%, a quarter of our taxes, at about $90 million a year. Our business and occupation taxes, our B&O taxes, are $71 million and about 1/5 of our tax pie. Real estate excise taxes, so when you're selling a property, the city portion represents $19 million, or 5% of our taxes. And then the big one is our sales taxes. From everything from going to the mall or the package that arrives at your house, that destination-based sales tax is something that the city recoups. And that is 38%, or $131 million. The important thing about this slide, other than the interesting tax information, are two things. The levies that expire, that note in the bottom right, indicate which of those, when those levies, the four at the very top on the right, when they're expiring. So your 1988 parks levy expires in 2029. Our mobility and fire levies are in 2036, and our parks levy is in 2032, and we'll go into kind of the impacts of some of those things later on. The more important thing is the bottom 2/3, the bottom left 2/3 of the pie. Our sales tax, our REIT, and our B&O are our most volatile tax sources that we have, and they're a lot more economically sensitive than, say, property taxes or utilities taxes. So said in a different way, as the economy does well, those sales taxes, those REIT taxes, those B&O taxes do well. When the economy doesn't, they don't do well. So what does that look like? So I'm talking about volatility and economic sensitivity, and I want to orient you to what we're calling our whisker and box chart. I can't take credit for that. That's a Microsoft term. But what you're looking at here is the main five tax sources. So going from left to right: property taxes, utility taxes, sales taxes, B&O, and REIT. And this is the year-over-year growth. So the shaded area represents, out of this 21-year period, 10 or 11 years of the middle annual growth. So if you look at the REIT annual growth, half of the years in this 21-year period fell somewhere between 35% increases or roughly 10% decreases. The other 25% are the other 50%, 25% of that, so 5 years, are above 40% growth, year-over-year growth, or they're in the exact opposite direction of greater than 40% negative growth. So REIT obviously has the most volatility, followed by B&O, sales taxes, and then utilities and property taxes are much more stable. As you can see from the property taxes on the left in the blue, it's hovering around 2 to 3% growth year over year. And those three dots that you may be seeing just above the 20% are the voted levies. So the top one is our most recent 2022 parks levy, followed by our transportation mobility connectivity levy and fire levies.
Councilmembers, I'd like to point out just a couple of things on that volatility, just for things for you to consider or to think about. With the REIT volatility, as we look deeper at our real estate excise taxes, Our biggest variables are actually the over $50 million sales of our larger commercial properties. When those shift from a year to year, we've seen some really big spikes. There was a period of time before the interest rates started to come back up when we saw quite a few transactions. Those kinds of large transactions seem to be the greatest volatility in that source. Right now for 2024, there haven't been any large transactions to date. So just frame of reference, it's an important piece. Also on the sales tax volatility, one of the things that we see with that is sales tax on construction. We've seen that construction boom, and that's been one of the pieces of volatility. Right now it's at a lower point, but important pieces in that volatility. So we're thinking about those impacts. It's not all straight retail sales. It is all types of sales and use taxes. So just points for you to be thinking about in that volatility.
Correct. And just one more piece of context here is the city of Bellevue is relatively unique for a city of its size, and especially within this region. A lot of our peer communities in the east side and greater Puget Sound do not have the diversified revenue portfolio that we have. So while other cities are in a little bit more of a constricted property tax oriented revenue picture, ours is a lot more diverse. So while it is volatile, it is very diverse revenue sources. So that is a testament to our well-balanced economy. So before we go into some of the numbers in the forecast, I did want to talk about some broad observations and risks related to our economic forecast, our tax forecast tonight. The main takeaway is that the city revenues are flat on net. So some revenue sources are growing year over year, some revenue sources are going down, but on net, we are staying about flat. We do try to, as we always joke, the forecast that we create is wrong the second we publish it. Unfortunately, that's just how it goes. The economic conditions are always changing day to day, week to week, month to month. But we can say with relative certainty that the revenue growth into 2025 is flat on aggregate with all of our revenue sources. The other piece that we do want to talk about is reductions in the one-time revenues from our real estate excise tax, and as John mentioned, the construction-related taxes. We have a number of construction-related taxes, including right-of-way leases, some flagging revenue for our police officers, but that really falls on our construction sales tax. And the construction sector was a bit of a lagging indicator. Many of our, I would say actually all of our sectors recovered by 2023. The last sector to finally reach pre-COVID levels was our food and accommodation sector in 2023. So as people moved from durable goods, they moved to more in-person experiences. They got a massage, they booked a hotel room. As people shifted their spending to that space, that all of those sectors finally caught up to pre-COVID levels. Construction, conversely, was actually doing well throughout the entire pandemic. And due to fiscal constraints, the Fed increasing interest rates, that pipeline that was in development, the permit pipeline, ended up drying up. So the construction projects already financed during the pandemic or in advance of the pandemic, their construction continued, whereas projects that hadn't fully gone through the permitting process, had not put a shovel in the ground, or had not secured their financing before the interest rates went up, that construction has not commenced. So we were able to proceed with what was already in the development pipeline through COVID and the years subsequent. But with higher interest rates, a tighter fiscal market and tighter financing market, it is harder to get those projects online and through the pipeline. So that is where we're seeing some of that construction sales tax go down and the other related sources of revenue. The other piece that I do want to mention is our structural gap. So we have this presentation as well as the last one. We're a little bit different than we've done in years past, where we would go through a lines crossing graphic. While the lines are still crossing, we still have a structural gap that is tied to how this state does property taxes and the limitations in state statute. That said, the structural gap that we have related to property tax is still manageable and something that, while is something we should keep a thoughtful eye on, it is not the focal point of this budget. It is something that we can absolutely manage. The other piece of this is there is a bounce back for many Bellevue sectors. So where there is growth and where there is decline, especially in construction, we do expect to see a bounce back in 2026 or soon thereafter, especially if the Fed decreases their interest rates at some point later this year and into next year. So what does this all look like? So I've been talking about volatility. I've been giving you broad spread. But over this time period, I really wanted to show how this looks in context. So 2019, perfectly normal year. Those are normal year-over-year growth. And then obviously 2020 happens. There's a dramatic drop and then a spike in 2021 for nearly every revenue source. Everything came back online for the most part, whereas not every sector was back to pre-COVID levels. Every sector grew. But with higher interest rates, you could see the line with the blue boxes is going down pretty dramatically in 2022. That's our REIT. So again, our most volatile tax is going down pretty dramatically, and we're showing it bounce up slightly, but it's still going down. So remember, that line is going up from 2022 to 2023, but it is still going down in absolute numbers by 35% or so. But the story that we're really trying to tell tonight is in 2025, 2026, and beyond, we're getting back to normal, more normalization. So we believe that across all of our various taxing sources, we should be back at historical levels or historical averages. So if you think back to that whisker and box plot chart I showed a few slides ago, it would be within that middle 50%, within that shaded range of the graph. So that we're kind of expecting that to be that historical experience to be our future experience from 2025 into the 2030s. The other thing I do want to point out before we move on from this slide is in the light gray, and I'm sorry if it's a little hard to see, it's with gray circles. You'll see there's a spike in 2023 and then a steep decline in 2032. That is the impact of the 2022 Parks Levy. So it goes up about 27% in 2023, and when that levy expires in 2032, there is a pretty dramatic decline in that respective year. So we've set up for ourselves a bit of a fiscal challenge in the early 2030s, depending on how that levy is funding existing parks construction and or maintenance. So something to flag for the latter half of this decade and early next. To kind of show you what this looks like in dollars, this is the slide that I do want to show you. It gives a little bit of a sense of, in terms of dollars, some of the volatility that we're talking about, as well as that Parks Levy component. So if you want to orient yourself to the slide, obviously this is by year from 2019 through 2034. And at the very bottom and moving upward, each color indicates a revenue source, a tax source that has more volatility. So the base of that chart is our utilities taxes, followed by our property taxes, B&O, sales, and REIT, REIT being the most volatile. And in 2021, 2022, and 2023, you're seeing it jump pretty significantly based off of 2020. Obviously, a lot of that is the economy coming back online, things reopening post-COVID, but a large chunk of that is due to historic construction levels, historic development, historic permitting, due to some of the very large office developments, millions of square feet of development, all of that construction sales tax being collected by the city. That's where you're seeing that impact. So it's not just the economy opening up, it is also historically large construction proceeds. In 2024, we are expecting a decrease in those construction proceeds, as I've mentioned before, and that's why you see the decrease in 2024. And the lines from 2025 and beyond are a lot more stable. There's more plodding along, more stable growth in all of those lines and all of those revenue sources. Of course, the one exception is, again, if you look at the second grouping up from 2023, and then you look at that same number in 2032, you see the increase of the Parks Levy, and then you see the relative decrease of the Parks Levy as it expires going into 2032. So again, depending on how that funding is used, that may provide some fiscal challenges, some choices for this council and others to deliberate as we go into the late 2020s and early 2030s. And finally, again, putting this into some more numbers, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you tonight. But I did want to show you, these are the numbers bordered in black are the numbers that we're going to be using as the basis of our 2025-2026 budget for our taxes. So the total revenues, or the total tax revenues for the city, are about $309 million for 2025, and an extra $323 million for 2026. And I do want to mention there is one more thing about the property taxes. This does assume that the 1% councilmanic property tax would be taken in 2025 and the years thereafter. The impact is somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000, and this meets past practice of the last 7 of 8 years doing the 1% councilmanic property tax adjustment. The other thing I do want to mention, which is a possibility for additional growth, and is where we are a little bit more conservative as staff, is this does not assume additional construction, additional development resulting from the yet to be approved comp plan update. So where there's significant upzoning in Bell Red, Wilbert, and other neighborhoods as the population shifts and as the demands on the city evolve, those adjustments, those updates are not included because this is not yet policy of the city and the forecast does not preempt council. So just as a bit of context, that is not included. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton to John.
Thank you, Evan. All right, next we're going to move on to our preliminary budget inputs and approach. These are some of the things that we're paying attention to as staff, and we will get to the tail end where our acting city manager will provide some of her thoughts and guidance that she's provided to staff to share with you what we've heard. You'll remember a couple months ago we had the opportunity to work together and you provided some great guidance to us on our comprehensive financial policies. There were three key areas where you provided guidance. That draft document is attached to tonight's packet, and it does include the investment waterfall, which prioritizes debt, then maintaining our assets and services, then delivering on our planned growth, and then putting money aside for future growth, and finally demonstrating new programs, services, and pilots. It also includes the guiding principles as you provided guidance around really honing in on that stewardship, transparency, professionalism, balanced risk profile, and being nimble for those opportunities. It also includes some of those other areas such as debt, and I want to pause there for a moment to make sure that what it says in that, and please do look, it is not saying that the city will go out and willy-nilly go after debt to advance things and extend or harm our bad credit. It very specifically says that debt has a strategic place within our investment cycle that might provide an opportunity to reduce some of our long-term costs, particularly for land or construction where we know we have revenue sources coming in to fund it. By funding something early in a cycle rather than later in the cycle, we can actually reduce costs. We want to make sure that it is really clear that no one is proposing or suggesting an advancing of that to put us in a risk position. It also brings forward what we've started to talk about as 10-year CIP and 10-year planning, and really increasing the visibility of our financial system. You will also remember that earlier this year you adopted the updated strategic target areas, which are largely the goal areas for the city, that we build all of our investments to make sure that we're seeing how we're going to advance on those. So our dollars will be associated with those strategic target areas. Again, you added a new strategic target area, providing a place for our public health and public safety. And updated some of the other components within those STAs. I do want to highlight that it is our intention that as we make our presentations, rather than as individual departments, we're actually going to be presenting as those 6 strategic target areas with multiple departments showing how we will be advancing those based on the proposed budget to help you think about those outcomes and how we're advancing that policy direction. You also spent time and adopted your City Council policy priorities, which provide us an opportunity to understand those priority areas for additional investment, which are a mix of one-time and ongoing approaches to what are the areas we need to advance as a city. And you'll also remember that at that time when you adopted them, we actually pulled some old ones off the list because they've become part of our regular practice or those things have been accomplished. We also receive a variety of inputs throughout the year. We've attached our management brief on the budget survey. That is one of the many pieces. This particular place is where all of our residents who have taken, and business and folks who have taken the survey, their top responses on the things that they saw as most important. This year, that resilient and secure place where all people feel safe and valued has really taken that top space. And the rest of these are really those other top spaces for all of the people who took the survey. Gives you a little bit of flavor, but this is one of the many inputs. There are a variety of surveys that go throughout the year, our CCC input, and a variety of business community inputs, all coming together to help provide information that informed your discussions and will be informing us as we do our work on the budget.
And one thing I would just like to add about our budget survey, our surveys that we incorporate within the budget are our business survey, our performance survey, and our budget survey. And this year, the budget survey, I believe, had somewhere over 2,500 respondents. So this is a very equitable, a very accessible way for us to hear from a really broad representative swath of our community, and we have invested historically within our last couple of cycles to get statistically significant representations of our community. So we are spending extra money to get as many calls, mailers out there as possible to get a broad swath of our community. So I just want to make sure we pointed that out.
One of the other areas that we do want to highlight in our last budget, we had talked about how we were bringing equity into our budget process. This year, as the departments began their work on making initial proposals and identifying priorities that they were seeing, they spent time in a budget equity toolkit, which helped them take a deep inventory of how we're making our program services and facilities accessible to all of our communities. This inventory will also serve as a platform as you continue your work in the updating of the Diversity Advantage Plan. And it really provides us with a database of ideas and constructs on how we're advancing. And what we found was the great work that is already underway in the city. This will be a feature within the budget book and part of what's informing our process. And with that, I'm actually going to turn to our acting city manager, Diane Carlson.
The first thing that I would like to do is thank the community members who came out tonight. So it was really nice to hear from many members of the community. This is the first public opportunity to provide input to the council, and I think the showing tonight was really great and says that I think we can look forward to many more of those as we go through the process. And I'm going to start with kind of a little bit of the punchline. You're going to hear a lot of similar things from me about the guidance that we provided to the organization at the beginning of this process as what John and Evan just went through. But the punchline is the city is in a relatively stable position going into this budget proposal. That's a really good thing comparatively. The cautious note is that it's not a growth budget, right? So when we sat down at the beginning of the year and looked at what are the things that are important to provide as guidance to the organization as they look to develop their components of the budget, John and I established a framework, and we were looking at how can we deliver on our existing commitments. So that was one of the primary guidance components that we asked the departments to look at. We also asked them to look at how can we advance the council's 24 through 26 priorities. Third, how do we further the objectives in the strategic target areas? And as John mentioned, we've been taking in input over the last couple of years, really significant amounts of input from our community through the comprehensive planning process and the surveys that Evan mentioned, and also some of that early work with the community dialogues that our CCC produced earlier this fall. The fourth component or guidance was how can we plan for the future? So We know we have significant growth that will continue in this city, so we asked the departments to look at making sure that they were considering setting up the city for the long view, and that would be both services and capital investments. So now I fast forward today, and we have a budget forecast that tells us, again, that we're in a pretty stable position, and that sort of flat position for the next couple years means that we're really not looking at the likelihood of adding a lot of new program areas, right? So we want to continue what we're doing, but we need to really be looking very carefully at adding new programs that will kind of give us a bow wave into the future. But we will look at some in this last phase of developing the budget, and we will also look at potential one-time moves. And that approach is familiar, should be familiar to many of you on the council who've been through this before. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to be really good fiscal stewards of the funds, and that we are looking to the future. And that means, not a reduction. We're not looking at reducing services, but we want to maintain them. And for new proposals or growth proposals that have been submitted, we want to continue to focus in on those guiding principles and look to see which ones can advance our strategic target areas and the council priorities. I wanted to also note that one of the fiscal stewardship foundations that I think this city has been built on is making sure that we have robust reserves. That's another thing that we'll be looking at in this budget proposal, is to ensure that we continue that and maintain reserves, and that's how we kind of get through some of those cycles of the up and downs in the tax revenues, and also how we look for growth in the future. I would like to mention that we are, how we're putting the budget together. Again, not new for most of you, but we have some new components this year. So John and Evan lead this across the city. There are principal leads, and we use our leadership team significantly to help us both with the design of the process and also with the prioritization. In addition, there's a very robust staff team that worked very hard reviewing all of our proposals. And there is a smaller team that's looking at helping to prioritize those proposals and put them into bundles that across departments, again, to align with our strategic target areas and the priorities. So we're nearing the final phase of the budget preparation process. That means we're getting into the trade-off phase and prioritization. We have still a couple months left to do that work. And we also know that that's going to be some of the hardest work, where we need to look at those trade-offs based on the revenues that we have available in this forecast. So we have several more engagement opportunities, as John and Evan mentioned. We'll also be looking in the fall to have some community information sessions to allow community to, across the city, to learn more about the budget and have ability to ask some questions about the budget as well. So with that, thank you very much, and I will turn it back to John.
Thank you. I just want to close out with a reminder on the timeline. We are, again, here tonight with the first public hearing and budget workshop to seek some guidance and input from you. We're here listening and soaking in what we can as we go into that final phase of trade-offs, and are preparing for the September through November processes, including those 2 additional public hearings, and we're looking forward to that process. And with that ends our presentation, Madam Mayor.
What I'm going to do here is I'm going to give us a break for 10 minutes. So we'll come back in 10 minutes and resume this discussion with you and questions, okay? Excellent. All right, thank you. so we left it that we're going to start with our questions or comments. And so let's start with Councilmember Zahn.
Oh, there we go. Just getting my papers together. Well, first of all, thank you very much. I really appreciated the memo and the information, because I think that although we go through this every other year, it's always helpful to have that foundational document as a basis from which, you know, definitional, it's really helpful to set the stage, so I really appreciate that. And then having this budget public hearing and seeing all of these, I think for me, one, I'm really grateful to know that our revenues are flat. So although I hear from a number of cities that are struggling with their revenues, that for us, we're in a very unique position of being diversified, so we have a stable, flat budget. With that said, certainly we know that the needs in the community are growing in a number of areas, whether we're talking about our Vision Zero and getting to the 2030 goal, or the human services, where we know that the amount of the request continues to be significantly higher than our ask. So this is going to be a tough year of having that fiscal discipline, as well as really thinking about how are we positioning for the future? How do we make those really smart strategic investments, even in a year where our revenues are flat? So I think for me, I just keep thinking about how we're going to make sure that we thread this needle through all of the priorities. I was thinking about the 24 to 26 council priorities that we worked on together, which is a lot. There's 12 things in there. However, the other piece that's on page 17 talks about our previous priorities and the fact that there are some that are completed, but there's a number of them that are incomplete. So I guess for me, I'd really like to understand as we move forward how we're going to understand how these pieces are going to be blended into the budget you're going to propose in September, between the previous priorities that are incorporated into normal business, which I believe means the strategic target areas, and then these new council priorities that are not the same. So I just want to be prepared for, you know, between now and September, how are we going to understand where you've pre-prioritized as a straw man, straw dog, what this is going to look like? Could you just help me with that part?
Councilmember, as we go into our process, and your timeliness of providing us with that early input of those priorities really helped our departments as they started to look at different approaches. When we are doing our packaging work that Acting City Manager Diane Carlson referenced, each of those teams are looking at the, I'm going to call it chunks or the buckets of the priorities and how they line up to look at if there's some one time or a little bit of ongoing, how are we looking at that to try and figure out, are there ways to advance certain things? So we're spending a little extra time to try and figure out where the small amount of additional investment can be. Are there portions of our existing dollars that we can allocate into those spaces? In the budget proposal as it comes forward, we anticipate that we will be highlighting those things in our budget book and in our presentations, because many of those things are leading edge concepts that will help become part of who we are as a city that aren't quite there yet. And so we'll be spending some time. There are some of those, as I read them, that will actually call on you for work items and additional help in thinking more deeply about some of the priorities so that we can have a more robust approach to some of those areas. So you will see it, but we have been taking that as input in and really thinking about how we're addressing that. And we believe we'll be able to point to many of those spaces. But it is, as we've suggested, a prioritization exercise, which means we can't accomplish everything that's on the list, but we're going to try and advance as much as possible.
Well said, John. It's fairly difficult, but our goal is to make sure that we're transparent with you about what we're able to accomplish. And of course, the council didn't prioritize your priorities. So we do need to have some conversation with you as we look at what's potentially achievable and how does that line up with how you might collectively prioritize those items.
Okay, and so as we then continue to do engagement with the community, that is potentially our ask of them as well, right? That if you only have 10 chips and you have X number of priorities, where would they want us to prioritize those efforts? And then I know that today was really talking about the revenue side of things. As I think about one of our strategic target areas being high-performing government, right? Then also looking at those investments or technology or innovation that then may have a short-term cost, but then from a long-term gain of being able to be more efficient and effective, do more with the same number of people we have. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're also looking at it from that lens. I know tonight was all about the revenue picture, but for me, I'm already jumping into, okay, so what is that implication from the standpoint of the expense side?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Neuenhuis.
I too just want to thank the community for coming out today and hearing so many great comments and the things that are very important to them and their neighborhoods and friends and family that they represent. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and I really hope we see that ongoing engagement because we are nowhere near done. So we want to continue to hear from everyone in our city. I also want to thank all the different heads of the departments that are here this evening as well. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for listening to the residents as well. Be it police or fire or HR, IT, utilities, so many of you are here, so thank you for being here this evening. And I really want to thank the interim city manager as well for what I think is some excellent guidance for all of us on this dais to be thinking about. Having read the memo and reviewed some of the briefings that we had previously, this is, again, a very flat revenue. And I think there's a lot for us to consider there, as well as what's touched on regarding, finishing up past projects as well, things that we haven't delivered on yet. And we heard that from some of our community members, but I just want them to know that, I think a lot of us, took notes and heard these themes about Vision Zero, about bike infrastructure, about Kids Quest, Boys and Girls Clubs, the public safety, the housing. There is a lot of need, and that need is going up, but we really need to balance that with where we are in terms of our revenues and our expenses as a city. And I know this is your best guess in terms of where we're at and where we're going, and but like you said, once it's published, it's already out of date. So I would very much urge caution and put as much as we can, the emphasis on those things that we have promised and we need to deliver on. And I think this is one of those budget cycles where, and I'll be first, we've been spoiled in some past years where we had more revenue to play with or put towards new projects. But, these are a lot of core things here that our residents are asking for. And again, we really need to deliver on. Thank you so much for the great outreach as well. I wanted to note that. I don't know what our all-time record is for number of people that have filled out our online surveys, but that feels pretty high, the 2,500 number that you referenced. So that's really great to hear. I guess a couple of quick questions for you, just so I understand it. On slide 11, regarding the REIT, it was 12%, if I remember correctly, in the 25 to 26, but then it went down to 6%. 6%. I was wondering if you could provide this a little bit more context on why you felt that would dip dramatically after the first couple of years.
Just want to make sure we're on the same.
Yeah,
page.
so 25, 26, 12, and then it goes to 6 for 27 through 34.
And I'm sorry, council member, what is the question specifically about that time period?
No, the question is the discrepancy from 12% down to 6% after we get through the 25, 26.
Okay. That is where we can only see so far out in terms of what we anticipate with the fiscal policy of the Fed.
Yeah.
So we're anticipating with rate cuts, we are going to see as people get used to a new interest rate normal. So I don't think we're going down to ever 0% or 1% or maybe even 2%, but maybe towards a 3.5%, or 4% interest rate.
Okay.
We do anticipate that people will be flipping their homes. People will acculturate to that new normal and be willing to sell their homes, even if they have a very favorable interest rate. So we do anticipate that there will be some spike in transactions, and then it will get back to a relatively normal historical average.
Okay. Okay.
What you're really seeing there is the move from 12% to 6% is year-over-year growth.
Mhm.
So we'll see a little bit more growth now because we're so low.
Right.
But in those out years, the amount of growth is a lower rate,
Okay.
which is still more normalized. And it seems like a big difference, but it's really just bringing it back down the year-over-year component. So
Okay.
we just aren't seeing a continued large surge.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an effect of most of the lines here. It's an effect of a pendulum swing, essentially.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you for explaining that. Also, appreciate very much the emphasis on maintaining our robust reserves. I think the city has always really championed that and always made sure that we had those reserves for things that we don't always anticipate or need in a pinch. We have them, and that type of fiscal responsibility is very important. So it's really important that we maintain that. So great presentation, great guidance, great feedback from our community. I look forward to the conversation as we continue to move forward here. This certainly puts it in a lot of context and things that we should or should not be looking at going forward. But again, I would urge caution, and I'm sure our resident fiscal hawk here, who's always been had a keen eye on budgets and revenues, and then the taxes that impact that. Because I tell you what, a lot of residents that I speak to are just very concerned about the cost of living in this city as well. I know that there are a few levers that we could pull in terms of generating additional revenue that were mentioned tonight and things that we've flirted with in the past. But I would urge caution on that, because there's a lot of folks that can barely hang on to their homes right now as we're seeing really high inflation. What they're paying at the grocery store is 3 times as what it used to be. We all know about housing being so incredibly expensive, but everything is incredibly expensive right now. And I wouldn't want to put additional burden on our residents right now at this time, especially when we're looking at revenues that are very flat and could put the city in kind of a precarious position. So for me, based on the excellent report tonight, is be very cautious and really focused. No cuts, but no dramatic leaps going forward either, and really deliver on those things that we promised to deliver on. So again, great report. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Great work, of course. Great presentation. Appreciate all the materials. It's been really helpful. I think it's helped inform the community members as well. And to be starting off relatively with this level of engagement is really encouraging for me. So I certainly share in what my colleagues have said so far about just the positive input and engagement we've had. And really to you and your team, everybody involved in this budget process, which I know crosses the whole city, made some good, subtle, impactful changes to the process. I think that's great. I know a lot of folks, myself included, want to make important investments in the city. And I know we all also appreciate the fact that we can't do everything we want to do. And I think, too, it's worth remembering that we can't do anything if we don't have a strong financial foundation. And we're lucky here that we do have that. This has been a non-negotiable in Bellevue for a long time, making sure that we have this strong foundation. So I think that really helps us. I also appreciate that over the years, we've made critical strategic investments in the city when we knew we should. And just, being new in this role, I already feel it's a lot easier because we've just struck such a good balance over the years. So there's a lot of new information here for me, and I appreciate all the work that's been done in the past that kind of makes this harder or easier. Also, too, just looked at some of the other materials that you provided. I think the comprehensive financial policies look good, certainly give me a lot of confidence. I think that's proof that the city's well-run. I think we can rely on that. The financial planning section itself, I thought, was really solid, provides proof. You talked a little bit about this earlier, too, John, about the balanced risk profile and balancing of risk reduction and mitigation with opportunities which provide reasonable near and long-term benefits. I think that approach just helps us stay in the right place to seize opportunities when they come up. And while I think we should always be careful with all the money we spend, I do think we want to be careful to make good investments when we can. So I know that finding that balance, that's not easy. I appreciate the expertise that you all bring to that. And two, this was mentioned, but having tax revenues that maintain this mix, I just think that's a good lesson for our neighbors and for the rest of the state. And I think it's really difficult to fund what we need to fund if we don't have that. And maybe it could be better, but it's great that it's as good as it is here. The 1% property tax, absolutely in favor of that. So that I think we should do. I have a question about that, though. I know we have some banked property tax capacity. I'm just curious what that is, what that number is.
Our current bank capacity is about $8 to $8.5 million.
Okay. And then too, you mentioned we've heard about this just kind of throughout the night, but you mentioned that the staff is approaching the budget, assuming economic circumstances require a limited or no growth environment for expenditures. And I'm just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit and maybe describe some of those economic circumstances.
As we think about it, so first we have the broader economic climate where we're seeing our sales tax and our construction is impacting our revenues. We're seeing consumer confidence in relatively low positions. So when we look at the price consumer confidence index, right? So we're more looking at what's happening in the broader nation. What we find is that Bellevue is a little bit lagging. And right now, all of those trends are relatively low. And that's why we're also not seeing a whole lot of different parts of sales tax come back quicker, right? So when we're thinking about durable goods, we're not seeing that move as much as the services. It's a different framing. We're going to see some of that shifting. We're looking at the consumer cost. We're watching our business environment. We're seeing some really, really positive things. While our vacancy rates have been low, I think we've all been really excited to see the new businesses coming in and starting to add back into those vacancy rates. Well, for those to start hitting our tax roll takes a little bit of time for them to get to them. So that's why we're thinking and seeing that 25 stays in that flat space, leads to 26 where we start to see that growth come back. There's always a dip when you look at those broader spaces where it goes down, and then it takes 1 to 2 years, sometimes 3 years to get out. The Great Recession, the 2008 period was almost 5 years to get out of. we're nothing like that. We've had a lot of federal stimulus that was early on in the form of the rates. Then it went into cash that went into individuals' pockets where it mitigated some of the impacts. Those federal components have dried up. And so we've seen the spending dry up associated with it. So those are the pieces that we're watching, along with when are people ready to start seeing things back on the market from a housing standpoint. Supply is pretty limited out there. We're not seeing transactions. So we watch all of those different kinds of spaces.
And the only thing I would add on that is part of the concern we have in a little bit small c conservative approach we have to construction is we have a flight to quality. Bellevue downtown is an incredibly attractive area for office real estate, Class A. Office real estate is really doing well, and we're a nationally competitive market for that segment of the economy. But we do have some areas where Class B and Class C office space is struggling. It's in a different place. It's less amenity rich than other parts like downtown. And I think it's a outstanding question of what happens to some of those developments, what happens to some of those areas, how does hybrid work, how does that persist, and how does the changing economic environment and economic behaviors as they persist well beyond COVID, how does that change kind of our development picture and what new projects, whether it be exclusively office or mixed use development in the future. So without having a really sure footing of what those economic behaviors are long term, there's a little bit more trepidation in terms of anticipating what that looks like, especially in the context of a update to the comp plan, which will also have a pretty large impact on that as well.
Okay, good. So, we heard a lot of good ideas tonight. I think, things that folks think we should do, things we want to do. So I'm just thinking, based on the economic circumstances that you just described, what if we decide we still want to move ahead? If we don't have the revenue, we want to find the revenue. Could you just talk a little bit about some of the options that we might look at for, adding that revenue?
Councilmember, there are always different types of revenue sources that are available that have been provided by the state. You talked a little bit, and there was alluding to the Transportation Benefit District, which has a couple of different types of sources, property tax and sales tax, which could be dedicated to a transportation purpose. There are levies that could go to the voters that could provide that excess capacity for projects or for ongoing. There are a couple of other smaller sources here and there that we could bring into being. What we would offer to you is that, in truth, there's a lot of homework and additional engagement with community to get to those spaces, right? And understanding what we've got in terms of revenue and helping you to kind of chart that course and engage the public. Our hope is that at some point, we think there's probably going to be a need for revenue, but we don't know when that's going to be. And when we do that together, we'll be able to help you engage the right and size it right to be able to tell the story of what those dollars would be invested in. Right? So thinking about that and how we do that in partnership with you is always part of that mix. I know some of our neighbors have been going out and in fact, they're doing a renewal right now that seems relatively large, and it's not small, but they've got an expiring tax source, and so they've been working that issue. There are others who have been working on revenue sources like around housing, and have been working with community to decide what is it that we're actually investing in to make sure that we are going after the right thing. So there's some work that we can do. In the short term, we're also looking at our overall cash, making sure that we've got the right reserves. We've identified them. We've put them in the right spaces so that you can see that they're there. You get to approve what's in those spaces to make sure it's there. And are there some one-time monies that might actually become freed up, which might give us an opportunity to move the dial, so to speak, on some of those key areas that are already identified in that process. So there's a variety of approaches from existing through potential new that could be in that mix.
Okay, good, thank you.
Can I just, clarify? Will you be giving us more on that information in the upcoming meetings on the different possibilities for revenues?
We'll be happy to. We've got a pretty standard grouping of revenue sources, we'll be happy to get that out to you very quickly.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
And I just wanted to add, there was plenty of discussion about some of the goals we've set for ourselves around Vision Zero, around climate, and those have deadlines. And I just have some concern that, while I like a goal that we're going to stretch, beyond that, if we are going to set a goal, I think we really need to make important investments to achieve it, or we reset it. So just as a part of the overall conversation. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Councilmember.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stokes?
Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the comments so far. I know a lot of things have been brought up from my partners here, but and I like the way you've approached this. We're not in 2012 anymore, but we've gone through too many. I mean, not too many. We've gone through a lot of these same kind of look at this and how we go on it, and I think you overall have done, I think, the best job I've seen on this and putting this together. And of course, it's going out. We're doing something really exceptional. We wouldn't do this in the regular term of the 10 years out and this so far out. I mean, to come here and say in 28 to 34. We're going to be doing everything we're doing right now is not what you're talking about. It's just that you have to you plan on this and look at this, but who knows? I mean, we've had hit some times in the past, back in 15, 16, when there have been times when we had less money than we thought we had and we planned on, so we've had to do something on that. And we've had a lot of times when the financing changes and we're in a different city in a sense. So it's very volatile. I mean, but I think what I like is the fact that you have set it up in this way that I really haven't seen this as complexly put together and taking a look at this. But, we're not just saying, okay, this is what it's going to be and this is what our plan is forever. And I think we don't even, well, one of the things that concerns me in terms of saying we're locked into this too much is that we have the Bell Red and Wilburton pieces, we've been talking about Bell Red and Wilburton for, ever, for 20 years and 10 years on things, and we were going to do it. And we even had to go from, the Bell Red look back we've been looking back 10 years ago, and so now we have to go forward. And things have changed, and this is not the same city 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So you have a real heavy job of having to come and get something rational and that we can work on. And I think we all have to keep in mind that we don't put this on the wall and say this is what we stick to. So we're going to be every 2 or 3 years looking at this differently and all that. And I think we've done a lot in the past about how we know how to do some of those things. And we were just having some conversations as a little break here about how do you do this and how does the city work, and that's something we're working through. So I'm comfortable with what you're putting out here because I think we need to have that's very rational. But things are going to happen, and with the light rail coming, with Wilburton, and that's going to be a big, big change in this city. We're going to be looking at something 5, 10 years from now that's so different, and the financing and everything is going to be so different and all that. So it's you have a really tough job to try to, be, so you set this out, so this is what's going to happen over the next 10 years. But I do agree, and I really like the way you've set this forward and given us the path to look at this. And but what's going to happen, we just have to keep in this, and you will keep us working on this. But there will be times when we have to come back and say, okay, things have changed, and I want the community to understand that too. We're not saying we're promising that for the next up to 2033, this is what we're going to do, but it's a way to say this is what we can keep and look at, and then we can adjust those as we go along. Certainly for the current time, this is excellent. It really sets us out. But we're going to find out 5 years from now some things we need to do that we hadn't even thought about now. So it's always going to be a change. So what I'm saying is, what I really like is you set up a way of functioning and working on this that I think is one of the better, for the best one I've seen from us on how to put this out there and how to have plan and how to be rational about this whole thing. Because, you know, something could, some big investment, we could go south on something, or it could go really up this way and all. So it's a good job, and I'm looking forward to us working on this and start planning then on what are we going to do the next 2-3 years, and keep that in mind. We do have to look for the future as well. So I think it's really been excellent, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I want to thank the people who come to tell us what they think about the budget. I think it's important to hear from them, and as you are in the process doing, I think that's good and commendable. I've been through, 30 years of budget up and down for the city, and we've seen through some real bad times, some obviously good times. And now we are in a pretty difficult time. I won't call it tough, because as we're going through COVID, right? I mean, we are looking at new norm, so things are different, changing. But I'm really glad what you're doing is really looking forward 10 years. And so whatever happens, we still don't know for sure, right? We'll figure it out. But, based on your very well reasoned, researched, that's what we got. And I think that provides transparency to the city, to the council, and to the public, to the community. So if we have to make change, we have the opportunity to make rational changes. Hopefully everybody understands. We all want things. There's no question about it. In my family, everybody's family, everybody wants everything. I do, but that's not reality, right? We have limited resources. And that's why I believe that fiscal prudence is very important. That's what served Bellevue the best, because the Bellevue residents realize we have to be responsible for what we do. Like Councilmember Hamilton mentioned, we have lots of good things we want to have done, but you cannot do it unless you have the financial means, and that's what we are trying to do. People have different needs, and Bellevue has done very well in the last 30 years. And so that's why people continue to come to us. You mentioned that. We are a gem in the region, if not in the country, in fact. We see that. And so that's what concerns me is, I think I like what you're planning out, laying it out for the next 10 years. And we need to follow what policies the council developed, in the previous years up to now. But we don't know for sure whether they're going to be implemented until we see what the reality is. And the reality is what we're talking about. And if we see reality change, we have to let people know about it. We have to make tough choices. We have to make priorities. Either go out, raise more money, right, if we can, or we have to tighten our belt, and we have done that before. And then if we still has a policy, we'll make the promise good when we have the opportunity to do so. But to do that, we have to seize on opportunities to make sure that our financial means can be realized. Otherwise, even if we have the best intention, if we don't have the program, the priority to continue to have people to come to Bellevue, to like us, to invest in us, we're not going to make it happen, ever. But I think Bellevue has not done that before. Bellevue has always continued to do the values that we have lived on and the public that want to and that we represent. So as a result, we are always able to make it work. So what I'm trying to say is we've developed good policies. We listen to the public. Bellevue has always done well, but we have to work hard to make sure that we have the financial means. To do that, we have to implement things right. So it's policy versus implementation. And that's what we have great staff, right? And you can implement it. And we can talk all day long what we want to do. We can promise the citizens everything they ask for. But if we don't get it implemented, it doesn't happen. And the people who help us implement it is the people, because they have to pay taxes, right? And if they don't pay taxes, we have to figure out how to make the money. The money is from healthy businesses that come. We're very happy that all the AI company or technology company, and their talented people are coming here. That's what pays taxes. That's what gives us financial wherewithal. So I believe that what you're doing is right. I 100% agree. But we need to make sure, like, for example, you're showing we're stable. We're not in bad shape, but we're not going to have any growth. That's fine. Let's maintain that. But I don't think we can promise that, for sure we're going to make it happen. Yes, for some reasonable time. But, if the uncertainty creeps up, if things change, who knows? Then we may have to make some tough choices, right? And we need to listen to everybody. I know most people haven't talked to us yet. I don't believe so, right? We just began this opportunity, the time. So we need to continue to do so. It's our job also as council members to talk to our constituents, right? With your information, we can say, this is our policy, this is what we're going to do, this is what I'm promising. Okay, happening. So I really believe that's really. I got some questions for you, however. What kind of what do you think is the people who understand? What do we have to tell them? How can we give them the policy? You mentioned about Councilmember Hamilton, the comprehensive plan. That's going to put a lot of priorities, put a lot of policies. That's going to make a lot of differences. We have some timeline we have to meet. So how do we manage it if we want to be flexible? How can we get the information out there? What is the trigger point? Let's say, what's a quick trigger point? How do we make some priority choices?
Councilmember, and I'll use the comp plan as an example.
Yes.
You're working right now on the policy framework. Following adoption of that policy framework, we as staff take that back and look at what is the implementation, what do we have to do to support that? If that represents the land use patterns for the next 20 to 40 years, what do we need to do? How do we need to plan our police, our fire, our utilities, right, to match that and meet it along the way to make sure that it develops in the right way and has the right levels of service, right? So each time you act on a policy document like one of those plans, that gives us the guidance to then go do the next level of work. That will show up as either individual programmatic decisions with finances associated with them, or it'll show up in the budget as part of our updates and the new policies. As we talked about the waterfall, that will actually drive us into the question of, it's a few down, there we go. We're gonna be delivering on the things that we've been planning on. So if we're putting money aside to invest in things, there's a space there. But in that waterfall of investment, we're intending, based off of your guidance, to put dollars aside and plan for that future growth, right? So we know that we aren't going to do everything right up front. We've got to make sure that we've got the prudent planning. So we're taking our historical policies and your approach here, which really allows us to do that planning work, right? Putting the dollars in the right place, making sure the public sees where we're storing and saving for the future, and investing in the things that you have given us guidance to. So our budget process will be a piece of that. So it's, again, you adopt the policy, we come back with the work plans on how we get there. There's financial choices. Some of them may make choices of invest new or use existing or stop doing some things and trade off to the other. That's all the prioritization process and part of what we would be bringing back to you on those kinds of trade-offs.
So we will have checkbacks, right? You come
Always.
back. What's the thinking about when you check back with us so that we can tell the public, have a conversation, say, hey, maybe we have to tweak here, slow down a bit. Because the reason I'm asking is the city, or maybe city manager can help. City manager's guidance is to, I agree, focus on stability. That's good. With limited revenue growth, which we understand. That's a very conservative, very safe assumption. But you say no reduction anticipated. I don't think we know that for sure, right? So I think that's something that you have to let us know. Then we have to make the decision. Do we generate more revenue? Maybe. If the public is willing to do it, we should do that. But if the public says no, maybe we have to make some choices. choice that would include maybe slow down, postpone, or some reduction. So what do you think? All of it? So when can we have the opportunity to have that kind of discussion?
Councilmember, you always have a budget process and a mid-biennium process.
Okay.
So at least once a year, you've always got that. We also provide updates on how we're doing on our investments, on how our spending's going, on delivering on the priorities. One of the things that you're going to see in 2025 is actually more frequent online reporting that is more current. So we're actually moving to more information availability to make sure that you and the public can track on how we're doing on investing the dollars the way that you have asked us to invest them and how we're delivering on those priorities. So we're making sure that that check back, that ability for the public to complete that loop and understand that we've followed through on the guidance and what they've provided the tax resources for.
Okay. That's the reason why I asked the question, because I don't really know what is even our reserve. I don't know. I know a reserve, but where's, how much, how big, what kind of projects can we use reserve to cover? I think these are the conversations we have to make, right? So can you say what kind of reserve? How do we tap on? How do we make it work properly?
Well, historically, we've kept large amounts in our fund balance, but what you'll find in the draft comprehensive policy document is in chapter 8 of that is actually a description of what the key reserves and contingencies are. And you will actually see those in the financial plan and will be able to point to those from a transparency standpoint so that the public understands where they are and what it is. So we've gone a little bit extra further to define out those, what those buckets, if you will, are and what they're for and things that are how they can be used. And then when we bring the dollars forward, you'll be in the position to approve that that is the right amount in going into those spaces. Okay.
The last question, Madam Mayor. You know, I've always been against 1% property tax increase because I believe that I understand the reasons because the revenue and the expenditures, the costs, very soon, we know it's projected. But it hasn't crossed yet, but we still anticipate that. So I voted against because I don't know what specifically the money is going to. It's like sitting there, and I would like to know, because if we're making choices, where do we spend the money? It's $750,000, and we spend $1.2 million there without even blinking an eye. So that's why I wonder. It's a bad message for the public because we don't know where the money goes, and it doesn't make sense if it's. We don't know how it's going to be spent or where it's going to spend. So can you say a couple words on it? If you want to convince me to vote for it.
Councilmember, with all due respect, I actually can't convince you one way or the other. I'm going to leave that to you and your colleagues. The 1%, if we think about it, property tax is a dollar amount. It doesn't actually fluctuate with the value of your house. You as a council adopt a dollar amount of property tax. Our costs increase based off of background inflationary factors, right? That's somewhere between 2 and 5%. That dollar amount, were it 1 million, 10 million, or 100 million, is a fixed amount. And by state law, that can only grow by 1% while the background inflation is growing at a faster rate. So the value of that dollar that you get in the property tax actually decreases, and you can buy less next year with that same dollar because the cost of those goods, services, and the staffing to support it has stayed constant, but the value of that dollar has gone down. Right? So the 1% doesn't buy you the whole amount of inflation. It buys you a little piece of it, and you're relying on the other more volatile sources of sales tax and B&O and REIT to help fill in some of those excess capacity. That's the mix of revenues that you've brought forward as a council that has been really thoughtful. That's allowed us to be in a great space. So that difference, that little bit of addition, allows us to help the property tax to keep a little bit of pace, not all the pace, with what it was buying before, so it's not losing too much ground.
Thanks for that perspective.
Just the other thing I would say
Yes.
really quickly is, With that 1%, it won't keep up with inflation. It will not keep up with the cost of service, but it is helping hedge against this volatility that we spent much of tonight talking about. It's $750,000, so it isn't a huge sum of money, but the more we can put towards the property taxes thoughtfully, deliberately in this 1% increment that's allowable, it does help take out some of the volatility in our tax mix, even if it's just a little bit.
Thank you.
Very good explanation.
Yeah, you may still have a
Thank you.
chance to get my vote.
And
Thank you.
I'm going to just say that the packet, what you've written up in there, is just so well done. I thought it was actually more interesting than our State of the City presentation. It's really good, and I encourage everybody to read that because it goes into great detail about all these things. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Lee, has your opinion changed based on that explanation?
That's a shot at it.
Okay, good. Okay, great job, guys. Great job. Congrats. If you change his mind on this, we need to all celebrate.
Let me ask you a question. One thing I said, there's some numbers I'd like to talk to you, but this has got a lot of numbers in there. I'm not quite sure, right? We're making statements in general policy, but thank you.
Thank you.
for reminding me.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank Mr. Risha and Phillips for a great presentation and the Finance and Asset Management Department for amazing package. You guys make the very, very complex topic very easy to understand for me as a new council member and I think the public. So great job and kudos to you. Public input is a very, very critical to our budget. It reflects the needs for our community. So I wanted to also, like my fellow council members, thanks everyone who spoke today. I encourage everyone to participate in other public hearing. And if I remember correctly, September 24th and November 12th are those public hearing. So please come and share your thought with us. I also wanted to acknowledge, like many of my fellow council members, the current economic climate and the slowdown is impacting our city revenue. So we should all be responsible stewards of our finance and prioritize existing services while investing strategically in our future. As a person who are close in age with our Gen Z, I really can relate to some of their needs, and I think our city should reflect that as well. 2 questions, hopefully they are easy. I don't mind that you give me the response later. One is about the long-term planning, the shift to a 10-year CIP. I think the benefits is very obvious, so it's amazing. But I just wanted to know what are the drawbacks are, if there is any, and are we flexible enough? Can we have a regular reviews? Or how now, because it's longer, we are going to bring the public and communicate with them in the 10 years. So give me any drawbacks. That's my first question. The second question is, you touch on a lot of about fluctuation in 3 of our sources, B&O, real estate, and sales tax. And I completely understand that they are out of the control of the city. But is there any maybe indirect mitigation that city can plan to lessen this volatility of these revenues? And I'm not talking about the reserve or some of, just some indirect strategic initiative that we can lessen the volatility of these 3 main revenue taxes. Thank you.
The first question is much easier than the second question.
That's why I asked that first.
The second one's probably a dissertation. Just I'll start there. But let me go back to the first question, which is drawbacks to a 10-year. Like a forecast, the moment you plan those out years, the further out you get, the less sure it is. But what it does on the positive side is requires the organization to think in that longer term strategy. And so that each biennium, when we bring an update to that 10-year plan, it'll add a couple years on and provide the opportunity to adjust what we think is most important in that spending. In fact, we know that the next sets of forecasts will be different. They might be some more one-time revenues that have come available because the Wilburton plan was approved and we're starting to see development happen. Or we hit a recessionary condition and we see a further slowdown. But it allows us to know what's out on the horizon and bring forward the things that are most important. The drawback, again, is you got a lot of things in those out years that we don't know if we're going to get there. We're thinking about some different kinds of funding strategies that may or may not exist. We get a sizable amount from grants. We'll put placeholders in that. Those grants might not be available in those longer time, and we might see something different come in from the state or the federal government, which will change some of those. That's all part of the process, but what it does is we can then speak to what we heard, and from a physical standpoint, we think these are the next sets of new investments or replacements of current investments, right? So how we take care of those long-term assets will be there as well. So there's trade-offs within it, but we feel that longer-term view, while it's less sure in those out years, the downside still gives a better look for you and for the public to understand that sets of longer-term priorities.
I agree 100% on the benefits of long-term, but just wanted to make sure we have mechanism to address that drawbacks you are talking about. And we do have those mechanisms. Absolutely,
and it's quite frankly sitting right here.
Great. Dissertation, please.
In simplest form, you're probably talking a few different kinds of approaches, right? Number one, you look to stable revenues. You start to change the mix from more volatile to more stable. What we're also seeing, though, is giving yourselves credit for some of the other works of this broader environment of what Bellevue is. So thinking about the different kinds of programs and impacts that are drawing businesses and people to want to live here and to join the tax structure that's here. That's actually a mitigation for your volatility, right? It's an interesting space, but the better environment that you make it, the more people want to be here. What we saw during COVID, and both leading up to it and how we're recovering from it, is slightly different than's happening in many of our neighboring communities. Even down to our tax revenues are coming in different than some of our other neighboring communities who are not just holding, they're freezing positions that are vacant and not filling things and delivering less. We're not in that position because our revenues are coming back flat rather than coming back low, right? So there's a lot of work that we could engage in this conversation, but think about your budget not just as the dollars of the tax revenues, but as the environment that you're creating through your strategic target areas and the goals and outcomes that you're producing. So that helps us. And so we'll keep that in mind. And I think I want to keep doing some thinking on this to maybe have another conversation around that. But it's some of the different ways to think about it.
Yeah, I would just want to add on. It's about the diversification of the economy. So over COVID, construction and destination-based sales tax, so people ordering stuff online, durable goods, replacing a refrigerator or furniture, having that sales tax come in or those construction proceeds come in, or our strong information technology sector that did really well in a hybrid environment. Those sectors carried the water for our general consumer, our in-person services that obviously suffered in a pandemic where the economy was, for all intents and purposes, closed. So it's really the best thing that we could do to be resilient and manage volatility is on net, we are growing. Sectors may ebb and flow, but we aren't a one company town where we are reliant on one employer. This is a very diverse economy across many sectors, and that's what makes us more resilient.
Thank you. Yeah, so economic diversification, business retention and support, workforce development, and I think I love the community development, the vibrancy that bring people, you are saying is part of that mitigation. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I hate being the last person because I have a lot of questions here and I apologize, but I do want to thank the community input, super valuable and will be along the entire process. I want to thank all the staff involved in this work and the city manager as well. I appreciate nimble being one of the values that we're using. It seems very appropriate for what we're dealing with in the next few years. If you could go to slide 11, there are two things that are troublesome to me. This is actual and forecasted tax revenues. And I think it's easy to look at this as similar to impact to the community, to the ratepayers or the taxpayers. But what we're not including in here are rates. And so when you look at utility taxes being pretty flat, we're not factoring in what we all know too well, the tremendous projected increase in utility rates over the next 10 years. And so I think we need to be cognizant of that. And there's probably other impacts as well that I'm not thinking of right now, but that's not reflective of this, and it's not intended to be because this is tax revenues. But we may want to have a graph of future impacts and how they might be increasing to the residents in Bellevue.
Absolutely.
The other thing that this does not reflect is the incredible amount of growth that we are planning for. This just looks like we're not going to get a single new person in our city for the next 10 years. And that's just, I don't think, true. And when I am at my PSRC meetings, Growth Management Act, everything that we've been doing over the last few years has been with the anticipation of a bare minimum of, 35,000 new housing units, 70,000 new jobs. I mean, I think we're actually going to get far more than that because when you look at the Pacific Northwest region, it looks like an airline map with us being the hub for the whole world. So we have people coming in from all over. And so it's hard for me to think about the impact of that population and that we better be planning for that and we better be building for that. We can't just sit here and do nothing. So that's just part of my thoughts here. So when you think about the projected utility rates, we are also going to DC and begging for a grant to help us pay for a major utility infrastructure project that has been delayed for years in our lake lines. If we are so lucky to get that, can we adjust some way? I know we're not talking about rates tonight, but even taxes so that if we don't need as much revenue, can we adjust down?
Simple answer is yes.
Okay.
Right. If we are overly successful in getting additional funding and partnership from federal, state, regional, whatever sourcing comes in, if that has the ability to mitigate some of those long-term questions, we know, and we're working very closely with the utilities department as they're thinking about that rate model. But until that happens, they can't make that adjustment. And we absolutely want to make sure we're being thoughtful and cautious. It's one of the reasons why they do such a long look at their infrastructure, because we have to be planning on that 20 and 30 and 40 and 60, 70-year cycle of some very major infrastructure that we don't want to be caught flat-footed, and you don't want to be caught flat-footed on. So,
And so that's part of the nimble that I like, and I think it's important. Did you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I mean, the only thing I would say is, as John said earlier, we don't anticipate the grants. We don't forecast that out. But when we have that, that's where we could supplant in different spaces and have that opportunity with you all as council and the community about how do we shift our resources and be nimble, as you say.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate council members on needs in community are growing. Absolutely. Okay, I'm halfway through. My asks, and as I listen to the community, would be to look at Kids Quest request, rapid implementation of Vision Zero infrastructure. We've talked as a council of increasing human service funding, increasing arts funding. And I had a question on the Boys and Girls Club. Are they not a separate line item? And if they are they in the Human Services budget?
They are an applicant to the Human Services budget.
Oh,
So
they
through
are
the
not- They do
process.
not have their own line item in the budget? I thought they did.
No, I don't believe they do.
Okay, check that.
They are in the Human Services grant application list.
Right, I know that, but I just remember from when we did Hidden Valley, because we have a long-term lease with them, I thought they became a line, anyway, we can check that. So I witnessed what happened when we didn't do the annual property tax for a while, and our projected revenues actually went down. And then we had all this catching up to do, and we had to do all these budgetary gymnastics to recover from that deficit that we created. So we do have bank capacity as a result of not having taken property tax for a few years. And I wonder, I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but is the impact to the resident or the taxpayer different when you use bank capacity versus when you increase the property tax by 1%? Okay.
The 1% is just a percentage basis. The using banked capacity is increasing it above that or at a different rate. But it's the impact still is the same. It's based on their relative value of the overall pie of property values.
Okay, that answers that. Thank you. One more thing. Oh, I think that was it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes?
So if we had some more thoughts as we went around, can we take a few more minutes?
I would really kind of like to leave it at this and encourage council to send emails to staff, and we're going to have other meetings about this because we have a whole nother item here, study session item, if you don't mind. So it's been a good conversation, great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a study session item. City Manager, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you. We have just one more study session, and I want to thank our emergency management team for being here tonight and ask Chief Jay Hagan and Emergency Manager Carl Lunek up to the table. So this is an update from the city's Office of Emergency Management. They are charged with creating and maintaining our emergency management program, and they are here tonight to provide you an update on that program and also some of their current projects. And I'd like to introduce the rest of the office as well. So we have Ellen Montagna. She's the planning coordinator, Brett Bernson, training coordinator, and Hazel Phillips, the senior administrative assistant. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Hagan.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, members of council, acting city manager, and city manager was correct. We have the entirety of the small but mighty Office of Emergency Management sitting behind me. And with me this evening is our emergency manager, Carl Lunak, with an update on the planning efforts at the city of Bellevue as it relates to emergency management. Carl?
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, council. Thank you very much for making time for us. Tonight, this is information only for you and an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the Office of Emergency Management here at the city of Bellevue. I'll be covering things in generally what we do in the Office of Emergency Management, but specifically going to be talking about what we do, some of the plans that we're currently in development with, current projects that we're working on, and then how the community as a whole can be more involved with the Office of Emergency Management and ultimately make Bellevue a more resilient community. So normally when I mention emergency management, people usually have a specific incident that they may have experienced in their life that is their major emergency that they remember. On the slide before you, we have a couple of emergencies that are local that impacted our community significantly. Things like in the upper left-hand corner, the snow event that happened in February of 2020. Of course, most of us forgot about that because something happened in March that took our focus. Back in 2019, we had a major flooding incident in the city with a lot of rain in the fall. If you've been around the city for a long time, I'm sure you remember back in 2006, we had the Hanukkah Eve windstorm that hit the region, knocked the power out throughout the whole area, and Bellevue was also very impacted by that event. And then the last photo we have for you is a look. We had a series, actually two of them, large apartment fires in August of last year in 2023 in our Crossroads neighborhood. And so the Office of Emergency Management, when it comes to emergencies, we take a whole community approach, right? We look at all of the different types of disasters or emergency situations that could potentially happen, whether those are natural in nature or human caused, whether accidental or intentional. With that, we look at kind of 5 different ways that we process or deal with emergencies. We try, of course, initially to protect the community from having emergencies of any kind to begin with. Then we move on to preparing city staff, council, and all of the community as a whole to be prepared for disasters and emergency situations. We also look at ways we can mitigate or reduce the impact of those disasters. And then, of course, there's response and recovery efforts that the Office of Emergency Management is engaged in quite frequently. The good news is, and this graphic tries to represent, that emergency situations are frequent. They happen all the time. However, the good news is the frequent types of emergencies have small impact, right? Think of a situation of a minor car accident, for example. If you're the driver of that car, that's an emergency, but it really doesn't impact the community as a whole, right? We have amazing first responders here at the city, staff in a lot of different operational departments that respond to emergencies at these lower levels all of the time throughout the city and do amazing work. The Office of Emergency Management generally doesn't get involved in that. Standard operating procedures are handled within each one of the departments. As you go up our little triangle graphic here, the good news is that as the intensity of emergencies increases, moving up the chart, the frequency decreases. And so that next level is those type of incidents, and I use an example of a small brush fire, for example. Fire responds to those things frequently. They do an amazing job. But when they respond, sometimes it blocks traffic, right? It starts to impact other departments across the city. It starts to impact specific businesses, and some of our community partners like schools or other service providers, trash pickup, those types of other things that are happening in the city at all time. That's normally the level where the Office of Emergency Management might get involved, depending on the complexity. And we're there just to support the effort that's happening in the field. Obviously, I'm not pulling fire hose trying to put out a fire. We leave that to the fire department. But we're there to help coordinate the impacts and make sure that the city as a whole can provide one seamless response to those incidents. As you move up to the next level, those larger kind of coordinated events, an example of that would be a severe weather incident, right? Whether it's snow, impactful heavy winds, right? Where lots of city departments are activated in a response mode, and that's really where the Office of Emergency Management kind of steps in and fills a major need. Now, we're only a team of 4, so we're not doing all of the work. The way we function is we open our Emergency Operations Center, which is basically just a large room here at City Hall, and we pull staff from all across the city from different regular daytime roles to fill specific emergency management needs. And we pull them into those positions to meet the need of what's happening out in the field to better respond and recover from the event that's taking place. So in this case, with severe storm in your mind, it's coordinating community messaging, right? We have a great communications department, but we want to make sure that that aligns with all of the other departments, so we're sending a seamless message across all the platforms to communicate to our diverse community. And so that's just a slight example of that kind of higher level. And then finally, at the peak of our little triangle here are the relatively rare events, like catastrophic earthquakes or potentially pandemics, right? That don't happen, thankfully, very frequently, but when they do, it really requires a coordinated effort pulled all the different departments together, key staff to fill specific roles in order to respond effectively and ultimately help the city recover from those things. The Office of Emergency Management takes the lead in the coordination with our neighboring jurisdictions in that, as well as with the county, the state, and of course, ultimately the federal government as needed. When we're not in that response mode or working on those types of things, we spend quite a bit of our time developing the plans that guide those other actions. And so to start with, we kind of have three different tiers of plans that we work on. We have our comprehensive emergency management plan, which is that real big picture, broad plan that covers how the city organizes during an emergency situation, how we function, how our emergency operations center is opened, how we declare or proclaim a disaster or emergency situation. Those kind of big picture things are covered in our comprehensive emergency management plan. A big piece of our comprehensive emergency management plan is a thing like our continuity of operations or our COOP plan, which goes to speak to how the city continues to carry on and do normal business during a disaster, right? Normal business still needs to happen while we're in response and recovery mode across the city. That next layer of plans are kind of the operational plans. And a big one that we just completed at the end of 2023 and circulated the start of this year is our shelter management plan. We're, as the Office of Emergency Management, really excited and proud that this plan came together the way it did, because it's a true reflection of a one city project, right? To make that plan go from original idea of there's a major disaster in the city and people are displaced from their normal place of residence within the city, wherever that might be, how can the city run a city-managed and operated shelter to give them some place to sleep at night? We do rely on our partners, and our shelter plan talks about, partner agencies like the Red Cross or Salvation Army or other service providers. But in this case, we wanted to have a plan where the city could do its part to manage that. And to do that, we look at city facilities like our community centers, and that immediately brought in parks to the table because they manage our community centers. What's the impact there? How can we do this? What's our best space? All of those real technical subject matter expert conversations, we needed the Parks Department engaged in that process. And we do that with a lot of the work that we do is work with subject matter experts in different departments. It didn't stop there with parks. It went on to, as we developed the plan, we had to pull legal in and sit them down at the table and have conversations about some of the difficult legal issues that happen when you're taking people from across the city and having them sleep in a congregate shelter situation where they're only a few feet apart from each other. Staffing that became a real good question. How are we going to draw enough staff from across the city? So we had to pull HR. What are our employment policies? Where do we have flexibility in declaring an emergency? How's the impact on union contracts? I mean, lots of real technical, difficult questions to be answered before we could get to a shelter management plan. Obviously, things like security questions. We relied heavily on the police department. I mean, every department here across the city was engaged in this process. And it really, again, is a great reflection. It's a huge win for a one city policy or the use of every department working well together to drive that ultimate goal of having a quality plan that makes us more capable to respond and recover from a future disaster. So a lot of individuals in each one of those departments. I'd love to take the time and name everyone who was involved, but it's late, so I'll just keep moving along. That last level of plans that I skipped by pretty quickly was the real tactical level, things like an event action plan. We just developed one for the Bellevue Family Fourth, right, down at the park. With an event like that happening in the city, the event action plans that we develop really just take into account, what each department is doing, where their resources are, so that during that event, if something bad were to happen, we're positioned really well to respond. We know where everyone's at. We know what radio frequencies they're communicating on. We know where the medic teams are located, all of that information. And that's on that lowest level of plans that we work on and develop frequently. So I'll highlight for you a few of the current kind of ongoing projects that we're working on. I mentioned our comprehensive emergency management plan. That plan is due for a major update by the end of 2025. So we've already begun working on that. To start that process, we're specifically working on our continuity of operations plan, and that kicks off with each department here this summer. And really the continuity of operations is how do we keep the work of the city continuously moving while disaster is happening. Another plan that is also a major piece of that comprehensive emergency management plan is our hazard mitigation plan. This one is another very important critical plan that we work on, specifically because it talks about how we can reduce the impacts of those disasters on all of the city infrastructure. I want to take just a minute to highlight that our transportation department really helped immensely with this project. They were able to secure a grant to help fund the writing of this plan. So we've got this plan underway. We hope to have it completed by the end of the year, maybe into the first quarter of next year, but we're really throwing a lot of resources at it to try and make it happen. Specifically within transportation, Christy Osterveen did a phenomenal job of really driving this project because what it does when it is completed is it will help the city apply for and qualify for additional infrastructure grants that are available from the federal government. So it's a huge win that we're working on this collectively as a city to get this accomplished in a very short, condensed timeline. Some of the other projects that we're currently working on after our shelter plan came out, becomes time now to train all the staff on, hey, if I take you out of accounting and put you in as a shelter worker, someone's got to do the training to make sure they know what they're doing in that role. So with that, we've developed a series of 8 different short video clips on the basics of shelter management that just are self-paced, worked really well with our HR department to get those posted on our training and management program, The Place, so that people from across the city, staff can log in on their account and watch those videos when it's convenient for them to do that. When that is complete, later this fall, we're gonna do some hands-on training where we go out to one of our community centers, set up cots, and actually practice all the hands-on pieces. Again, another really neat piece to this where, again, another department jumped in and really helped out is with that, we wanted to make sure that our shelters are accessible. And so all of the documentation and paperwork that goes along with operating a shelter, our Parks Department came up with some additional funding to have all of those documents translated into our top languages, just to make that a more accessible resource for all of our community that we serve. So again, it's a real win for that one city policy here at the city. A couple other projects that we just wrapped up actually was the update to our Emergency Operations Center. As I mentioned earlier, it's a room here in City Hall loaded with a bunch of technology that allows us to seamlessly communicate with other departments if they're working remote. It also allows us to pull people from across the city and use our incident management system to be able to track an incident, resource requests, all the work that takes place behind the scenes to make response and recovery go smoothly. And IT and the FAM department were great partners in this process. We had part of it grant funded, part of it with replacement funds that IT had set aside for this. And now we've got a really top-notch, state-of-the-art room that works incredibly well. We tested it out during the July 4th celebration, and we kind of managed that event at the park from the Emergency Operations Center. So we're watching cameras from everywhere, police drone footage. It was quite an impressive feat and really proved that our room is functional and works exactly the way we wanted it to. So we thank the IT department and FAM for their help with that. So how can the community get involved? We as the Office of Emergency Management love to go out and engage the community and talk about our 5 different phases of avoiding emergencies, mitigating, preparing for, planning for. And one of the ways we do that is with our 2 weeks ready effort that we bring out into the community with us. The fundamentals of emergency management for residents and folks that work, play, reside here hasn't changed. They've been the same for a long time, and that's we'd like everybody to have an individual plan, a family plan, a plan at work, a plan for their community, a plan at their place of worship, wherever they're involved, have an emergency plan. And the 2 weeks ready helps them walk through that process. Second fundamental piece of emergency management is having some emergency supplies, right? Don't be that individual that the minute the windstorm hits, you have to run to the store to buy toilet paper. We all saw how well that worked. And then finally, the staying informed, right? And seeking out and taking advantage of some of the other training opportunities that we make available throughout the city. And those are things like the next thing on our list, our emergency preparedness workshop, which is 3 to 4 hours of hands-on training on preparedness, on putting together emergency supplies and what that really looks like. We're gonna have another one of those coming up sometime in September, near the end of the month. We haven't finalized those dates yet, but we'll be having another one of those, so stay tuned. Or if you're really hardcore and you really want some good preparedness information, we do offer our Community Emergency Response Team Training, or CERT. We have a couple of our CERT leadership team here with us tonight who have endured the entire meeting to be here, which I greatly appreciate. Our CERT training, if you're not familiar with it, is in essence 24 hours of emergency training spread out in bite-sized kind of 3-hour pieces. For this particular class, we're stretching it out 1 class per week over an 8-week period, with that final week being a disaster simulation. So we throw a whole disaster at them, and they walk through the process of practicing the skills that they've learned over those previous 7 weeks. And the dates are there on your screen starting September 10th, running through the final exercise there at the end of October on the 26th. So amazing opportunity to get involved. We did put a couple of QR codes up there in the packet for everyone. So if you want to go directly to our comprehensive emergency management plan and look at the current plan of where we're at, we also included our some preparedness information in that QR code, and then finally information on the CERT class, other volunteer opportunities for the Office of Emergency Management. And I'll just leave those up for a second or two. And again, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come tonight and share with you a little bit. Are there any questions, comments?
Well, great. Thank you so much for waiting so long to present, and then all this work and time and effort for just in case. It's very impressive. Does anybody have any comments or questions, Councilmember Zahn?
Yeah, thank you, Carl and Chief Hagan. I think this is really important because in order for us to be a resilient city, we have to be ready ourselves and then make sure that our community is ready. I did have a couple of questions. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to get right to the questions. When you talked about the shelter management plan, do you envision that that would also be able to be deployed when we have 90-some degree weather and freezing temperatures, so that actually people that may not have a place to be inside at night would be able to use? So, just wanted to understand that. And then on the CERT, are there ways that you map that so that neighborhoods know who in their neighborhood are CERT and be able to really help them to be 2-week ready? So those are my 2 key questions.
Yeah, both great questions, if I may say so. And thank you for wearing CERT green tonight. I appreciate that.
I am CERT certified
Yes,
at
yes.
the port, so.
In developing the shelter management plan, that was one of the primary questions that was brought up early on in the planning process. For the purpose of our shelter management plan, it is not designed to be set up as a temporary, short-term kind of cooling center. In looking at the impacts to regularly functioned events at the community centers and the regular impact to city staff, it didn't seem, in the planning team, it didn't feel like it was a good, responsible use of resources to designate it for a short-term, daytime heat shelter, for example. Instead, we're looking at other opportunities across the city to take advantage of other shared spaces, things like partnering with our libraries, some of the large shopping centers and areas, really like us to encourage shoppers to go there and hang out and have a spot to cool down. But that particular piece was not intended with our shelter management plan. And then as far as CERT goes, our volunteer corps, managed by the folks sitting behind me, they do a really good job of pushing out regular information to community members about other opportunities, advanced training, ongoing education, and really help pull different volunteers and CERT trained folks together to keep them fresh with their skills and encourage that ongoing preparation piece. Starting a few years back, pre-pandemic, the Office of Emergency Management kind of handed that over to our volunteer corps and let them kind of self-manage that piece of it to keep it going. And it seems to be working pretty well.
Great, thank you so much.
Yep.
Deputy Mayor.
I have 2 or 3 questions, but because of time, I'm not going to ask. But I would remiss if I wouldn't thank you, Chief. Thank you, Carl, the whole emergency management team. Thank you so much. Our beloved volunteer for CERT, Kurt, what is the name?
CERT, yes.
I think John and I, we want to be part of that class. Please sign us up. I think it is very important to acknowledge the importance of this program. A strong emergency management plan is crucial to protecting our residents and ensuring a swift and effective response to disasters. So I really, really appreciate you for what you are doing for our city. Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, John, did you?
I was just going to say, it's really great to get this out there, and people in the community really should know more about this. And if we can help you, we'd be glad to do that too. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councilmember. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you so much. And with that, we are adjourned.